Hello guys, welcome to Phoenix What If. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto was the Jinchuriki of the Black Dragon Acnologia and fell in love with Wendy Marvell? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Maelstrom and the Sky Maiden. Pain was the first architect of his new reality. It was a searing, tearing agony that felt like being unwritten from existence and scribbled back in with a broken quill. One moment, he was on a battlefield of gods and monsters, the raw, incandescent orange chakra of the nine tails cloaking him like a second sun, his fist connecting with the porcelain pale face of a rabbit goddess. The next, the world dissolved into a screaming vortex of color and sound. It was not a teleportation jutsu. He knew the gut-wrenching lurch of the flying Raijin, the dizzying swirl of a Kamui. This was different. This was deconstruction. His senses shattered. He saw the roar of a tailed beast bomb and heard the blinding white of Kagaya's all-killing ash bones. The smell of ozone and blood was tangled with the taste of starlight and void. He felt his very being. Every cell, every flicker of chakra, pulled taut like a string on a cosmic instrument, plucked by a careless god, and then snapped. He didn't so much land as he did coalesce, slamming back into the confines of a physical body with a gut-wrenching finality. The impact was a thunderclap that echoed in bones he wasn't sure were his own a second ago. He lay broken in a crater of his own making, the rich, loamy scent of damp earth filling his nostrils. Towering trees, thicker and more ancient than any in the forests around Konoha, formed a dense canopy high above, dappling the forest floor in a gentle, emerald twilight. The air was thick, humid, and so clean it felt alien in his lungs. It was achingly peaceful, a stark, insulting contrast to the agony that screamed through every fiber of his being. He tried to push himself up, his muscles screaming in protest. A wave of nausea and vertigo sent him crashing back down. His vision swam. The vibrant orange of his own chakra was gone, replaced by a cold, leaden exhaustion. Kurama, his partner, his prisoner, his friend, was silent. The familiar, grumbling presence in the back of his mind was gone, the link between them severed. The emptiness was a physical blow, a hollow chasm where a mountain had once stood. He was alone. Not alone, a voice rasped in his mind. It was not the familiar, rumbling baritone of the nine tails. This voice was deeper, colder, scraped raw with ancient hatred. It was the sound of grinding stone and dying embers. A voice that had pronounced the doom of nations. You were simply infested with a better class of monster now, human. Naruto's blood ran cold. He tried to reach for his chakra, to enter his own mindscape, but found the path barred. A new seal, black and jagged like shattered obsidian, had been violently superimposed over the fading ghost of the 8 trigrams seal on his consciousness. It pulsed a power so immense and so malevolent it made Kurama's chakra feel like a warm campfire in comparison. This was a wildfire that had consumed a world. What? Who are you? Naruto thought, his mind reeling. A dry, mirthless chuckle echoed in his skull. I am the end. I am the silence that follows the last scream. I am the shadow that devours the sun. You may call me Acnologia. The name meant nothing to him, but the sheer, apocalyptic arrogance behind it was suffocating. He could feel the being's contempt, a boundless ocean of it, directed at him, at the trees, at the very air he was breathing. It hated existence itself. Where is Kurama, the fox, that insignificant spark of nature's rage? The voice, Acnologia, sneered. Your world was torn asunder, boy. The energies that brought you here were chaotic. Your soul was the only anchor. And I was adrift in the same storm. When your vessel shattered, I claimed it. The fox was expunged. A lesser parasite, cleansed to make way for the true plague. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through Naruto's pain. Kurama was gone. The idea was inconceivable. He grit his teeth, pushing down the wave of despair. He couldn't afford to break. Not here. Not now. He forced himself into a sitting position, hissing as his ribs protested. His tattered black and orange jacket was barely hanging on, and his pants were shredded. He was covered in dirt, blood, and a deep, soul-crushing weariness. It was then he noticed the scent. A faint, sweet smell on the wind, like fresh rain and blooming flowers. And something else, something that made the new presence in his soul stir with a low, predatory growl. Dragon, Acnologia hissed in his mind. The foul stench of a dragon clings to this world. Pathetic, tamed beasts, playing at being gods. They will all burn. Before Naruto could process the bizarre statement, he heard another sound, a soft gasp. He looked up, his eyes narrowing. Standing at the edge of the crater, half hidden behind the trunk of a massive tree, was a small girl. She couldn't have been much older than he was when he first joined Team 7. She had long, dark blue hair that fell in waves around her shoulders, and wide, brown eyes that were intently fixed on him with a mixture of fear and profound concern. She clutched a woven basket filled with herbs to her chest like a shield. Beside her, a white cat with a pink bow stood on its hind legs, its expression one of pure, unadulterated alarm. A talking cat. No, a cat with wings. This day was just getting stranger. Carla, stay back, the girl whispered, though her voice carried in the quiet forest. Wendy, are you mad? The cat, Carla, hissed, her fur on end. The magical power coming from him, it's monstrous. It's like nothing I've ever felt before. We need to leave, now. The girl, Wendy, hesitated. She looked at him, at the pain etched on his face, the way his arm was bent at an unnatural angle. Her fear was still there, but something else was overriding it. Compassion. It was an expression he'd rarely seen directed at himself. But, he's hurt, she said softly, taking a hesitant step forward. Naruto instinctively tensed, pushing himself further back. His hand rested on the pouch of kunai still strapped to his thigh. It was a reflex born from a lifetime of being treated like a rabid dog. He expected screams. He expected rocks to be thrown. He expected the glares of hatred. That had been the wallpaper of his childhood. Kill her, Acnologia whispered, the suggestion slithering into his thoughts with venomous ease. She has the scent of a dragon. She is an enemy. Rip the flesh from her bones. Show her what true power is. No, Naruto grunted, the word scraping his raw throat. Wendy stopped, her eyes widening. No, get back, he managed, forcing himself to his feet. He swayed, the world tilting violently. I'm dangerous. It was a warning, but it was also a plea. He didn't know what this new power inside him was capable of. He had felt a sliver of its boundless rage, and it terrified him. Carla grabbed Wendy's dress. He's warning us. Let's go. But Wendy's gaze was fixed on the blood dripping from his arm. She took another step, then another, her movements slow and deliberate. As if approaching a cornered animal. You're hurt badly. Please, let me help. I can use healing magic. Magic. The word was foreign. Was that what they called chakra here? Magic is the domain of the weak. Acnologia scoffed. A child's parlor trick. Annihilate her and the winged pest. Naruto ignored the voice, focusing on the girl. She was closer now, close enough for him to see the genuine worry in her eyes. There was no deceit, no hidden malice. He had spent his life learning to read the subtle tells of a liar, the flicker of contempt in a person's eyes. He saw none of it in her. Why? He asked, his voice rough with suspicion. You don't know me. You don't have to know someone to help them, Wendy replied simply, her voice gaining a quiet confidence. She stopped a few feet away, holding up her hands to show she meant no harm. I'm a sky dragon slayer. My magic can heal wounds. Dragon slayer. The term sent a jolt through him, and he could feel Acnologia's interest peak, a cold, reptilian curiosity. So, the lapdogs of the dragons have given whelps their power. A mockery. A disgusting perversion. This world is more rotten than I imagined. Naruto swayed again, his vision blurring at the edges. The pain was becoming too much. He grit his teeth, but his legs finally gave out. He collapsed to one knee, panting. That was all the opening Wendy needed. She rushed to his side, ignoring Carla's frantic protests. Please, hold still. She knelt in front of him, her small hands hovering over his most grievous wound, a deep gash on his forearm. A soft, gentle teal light enveloped her hands, casting a warm glow on his skin. It felt peaceful. The light was clean, pure, a stark contrast to the roiling abyss of hatred sealed within him. The pain began to recede, replaced by a soothing coolness as his skin knitted itself back together, the torn muscle fibers reweaving themselves under her gentle power. He stared, dumbfounded. It was a level of medical ninjutsu that would make Sakura jealous. Performed with an ease that was almost unbelievable. As she worked, he watched her face, scrunched up in concentration. She was putting her all into this. For a complete stranger she had every reason to fear. The simple, unconditional act of kindness was a foreign concept, a language he barely understood. It disarmed him more effectively than any weapon could. His ingrained hostility began to crumble, leaving behind only a weary confusion. The power of the sky dragon, Grandini, Acnologia mused, the name dripping with disdain. A useless, pacifistic beast. This sea-hilled channels her power to mend. What a waste. It's gone, Naruto murmured, flexing his newly healed arm. The skin was smooth, not even a scar remaining. Wendy looked up and gave him a small, shy smile. I'm glad I could help. I'm Wendy Marvell, and this is Carla. The white cat, Carla, sniffed indignantly. Against my better judgment, Naruto stared at the girl, Wendy. For the first time since he'd woken up in this strange, terrifying world, the crushing weight on his chest lifted, just a fraction. He opened his mouth to say his name, to offer a word of thanks, but it was cut short by a jeering laugh from the edge of the woods. Well, what have we here? A little bluebird and her pet cat, cornering some fresh meat. 5 men stepped out from behind the trees, surrounding the crater. They were rough-looking, clad in mismatched armor and wielding crude weapons, axes, swords, spiked clubs. Their eyes were filled with a greasy, predatory light. They wore the tattered remnants of a symbol on their clothes. A mark Naruto didn't recognize, but the feeling they gave off was universal. Thugs, plain and simple. The leader, a hulking man with a scar that bisected his eyebrow, grinned, showing a row of yellowed teeth. Looks like we stumbled on a real prize. The girl's a magic user. She'll fetch a high price on the black market. The boy, well, we can have some fun with him first. Wendy scrambled back, her brief moment of confidence evaporating into fear. She moved to stand in front of Naruto, a gesture as foolish as it was brave. Leave him alone. He's done nothing to you. The man laughed. He doesn't have to. We're remnants of Phantom Lord, girly. We take what we want. And right now, we want you. The name meant nothing to Naruto, but their intent was crystal clear. A familiar, cold fury began to build in his gut. These men were just like every bully, every scornful villager, every enemy who saw weakness as an invitation for cruelty. Finally, Acnologia's voice was a purr of satisfaction in his mind. Wretched, crawling insects. Let us remind them why they should fear the dark, boy. Let us give them an unforgettable lesson in pain. This time, Naruto didn't resist the voice. He didn't fight the anger. Because it wasn't just Acnologia's anger anymore. It was his, too. He placed a hand on Wendy's shoulder, gently moving her behind him. He rose to his full height, his body no longer screaming in pain but thrumming with a strange, dark energy. The air grew heavy, charged with an invisible pressure that made the leaves on the trees tremble. You want her? Naruto's voice was dangerously quiet. You'll have to go through me. The thugs laughed. Big words for a half-dead kid in rags, the leader sneered, hefting his axe. Get him. The first one rushed forward, a brutish man with a spiked club. He swung it in a wide, sloppy arc aimed at Naruto's head. To him, the boy was barely moving. But to Naruto, the world slowed to a crawl. He saw the flex of the man's muscles, the glint of light on the iron spikes, the spray of spittle from his snarling mouth. Too slow, Acnologia yawned in his mind. Naruto didn't dodge. He simply tilted his head to the side, the club whistling past his ear. Close enough to stir his wild, blonde hair. Before the man could even register his miss, Naruto's hand shot out, grabbing him by the throat. It wasn't a ninja's precise strike, it was a predator's grip. His fingers digging into flesh and sinew with crushing force. The man's eyes bulged, his mouth opening in a silent scream as he was lifted effortlessly off the ground. A sickening crack echoed in the clearing as Naruto tightened his grip, snapping the man's neck with contemptuous ease. He tossed the body aside like a piece of trash. It hit the ground with a wet, final thud. Silence. The 4 remaining thugs froze, their jeering smiles wiped from their faces, replaced with shock and a dawning horror. Wendy gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Even Carla was stunned into speechlessness. Naruto's head snapped up, his eyes locking onto the leader. But his eyes weren't the bright cerulean blue they had been moments before. They were slitted, reptilian, and glowed with a faint, cobalt light. Burning with an intensity that was utterly inhuman. "Who's next?" he asked, his voice a low growl that seemed to vibrate in their very bones. "Yes, boy, show them fear," Acnologia urged, a dark glee coloring his tone. "Let my power flow through you. It is a far greater gift than that pathetic fox could ever offer." A black, scale-like pattern began to creep up Naruto's arm. Intricate markings that swirled and sharpened like tribal tattoos made of living shadow. The energy crackling around him was no longer just chakra. It was wilder, more primal. It was magic. "Monster!" one of the men screamed. Breaking the spell, fear gave way to a desperate, self-preserving rage. "Kill the monster!" They charged as one. A swordsman swung his blade in a decapitating strike. And with an axe brought it down in a vertical chop. The leader roared, channeling a crude form of earth magic, sending spikes of rock shooting toward Naruto from the ground. Naruto didn't move to evade. He met the charge head-on. He ducked under the sword swing, the blade shearing off a lock of his blonde hair. As he rose, his right hand began to swirl with a ball of pure, rotating energy. It was his Rasengan, but it was tainted. Flecks of black energy sparked within the brilliant blue sphere, turning it a violent, stormy indigo. He slammed the corrupted Rasengan into the axe-wielder's chest. The impact wasn't the grinding explosion the jutsu was known for. It was a detonation. A shockwave of pure, annihilating force erupted from his palm, vaporizing the man's torso and sending a concussive blast tearing through the forest behind him. Trees splintered and were thrown into the air like matchsticks. The swordsman stared in horror at the space where his comrade had been. That was all the time Naruto needed. His left arm, now almost completely covered in the black dragon scales, shot out. His fingernails elongated into vicious black claws that sliced through the man's sword and the arm holding it with no resistance. The man screamed, clutching the bleeding stump where his arm had been. Naruto's other hand, now wreathed in black lightning, touched the man's forehead. The scream was cut short as the man convulsed and dropped, smoke rising from his lifeless eyes. 2 down, 2 to go. The rock spikes shot up from the ground, aiming to impale him. Naruto simply stomped his foot. The ground cracked beneath him. A wave of dark energy radiating outwards and shattering the earth's spikes into pebbles. He moved, a blur of motion too fast for the normal eye to follow, appearing directly in front of the magic-using thug. The man's eyes were wide with terror. He saw death coming and was powerless to stop it. "Please," he started to beg. Naruto's scaled hand plunged into the man's chest, ripping out something that glowed with a faint magical aura before it dissolved into nothing. The man collapsed, a hollowed-out shell. Now, only the leader remained. He stood trembling, his axe having fallen from his nerveless fingers. He was staring not at a boy, but at an avatar of death. Naruto turned to face him, his body now covered in patches of the shimmering black scales. 2 small, wicked-looking horns were beginning to protrude from his hairline, and the air around him was so cold it began to frost the grass at his feet. This wasn't a fight, it was an execution. What are you?" the leader stammered, scrambling backwards on his hands and feet. Naruto didn't answer with words. He opened his mouth, and what came out was not a human shout, but a roar. It was a sound that tore at the very fabric of the world. A sound of pure, apocalyptic rage. It was the roar of a dragon. A wave of force, visible as a ripple in the air, slammed into the last thug, flaying him, breaking him, and sending his tattered remains tumbling into the trees. And then, silence once more. A deep, profound quiet that was more deafening than the roar itself. The clearing was a ruin. A deep trench was carved into the forest floor. Shattered trees lay smoldering, and in the center of it all stood Naruto, panting lightly, the black markings slowly receding from his skin, his eyes fading back to their normal blue. The monstrous power retreated, leaving him feeling drained and hollow. He looked at his hands, then at the carnage around him. He had done that. He had killed them without a second thought, with a brutality he didn't know he possessed. A part of him was horrified. But another, darker part, the part that was now inexorably linked with Acnologia, was satisfied. A fine start, the dragon's voice echoed, laced with approval. But this is merely the twitch of a finger. Soon, you will learn to wield the strength of an arm, a body. Soon, you will wield the power to unmake worlds. Naruto's breath hitched. He turned, his eyes falling on Wendy and Carla. They were huddled together at the edge of the crater, staring at him. Wendy wasn't looking at him with the gratitude of someone who had been rescued. She was looking at him with pure, undiluted terror. Her face was pale, her body trembling. He had saved her, but he had become the monster. It was Konoha all over again. The glares, the fear, the whispers of demon. His heart, which had felt a flicker of warmth just moments before, turned to a block of ice in his chest. Of course, this was his reality. This was his curse. Before he could turn and run, to disappear into the woods and never be seen again, another surge of power cut through the air. This one was different. It was powerful, yes, but not malevolent. It felt varied. One signature was fiery and reckless. Another was cold and controlled, and a third was sharp and unyielding, like tempered steel. 3 figures landed at the edge of the clearing. A young man with wild pink hair and a scarf that looked like it was made of scales. A dark-haired young man who was, for some reason, already stripping off his shirt. And a woman in full plate armor with striking scarlet hair, her gaze sharp and assessing. What in the world happened here? The armored woman, Urza, demanded, her eyes taking in the devastation. Her gaze snapped from the bodies to Naruto, then to the terrified Wendy. The pink-haired boy, Natsu, sniffed the air, his eyes widening. A dragon. I smell a dragon. But it's weird. It's all mixed up. Hey, you. He pointed directly at Naruto. Who are you? Did you do this? Fight me. Wendy finally found her voice, a small, trembling squeak. Natsu, Urza, Gray, stay back. The shirtless one, Gray, created a sword out of ice in his hand. Wendy, get away from him. Is he the one who hurt you? Quote, no, he saved me, she stammered, but her words lacked conviction as she glanced nervously at the bodies. Those men, they were going to, and he. Urza's eyes narrowed, her expression grim. She re-equipped a massive spear into her hand. He saved you by doing this. This isn't rescue. This is extermination. This is the work of a dark mage. They were closing in, their stances ready for battle. Naruto didn't move. He was tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of being misunderstood. Tired of being feared for a power he never asked for. He could fight them. Acnologia was already screaming at him to do so, to show these insects what a real monster looked like. Tear them limb from limb. Feast on their despair. But he just couldn't. He looked past them, at Wendy. The fear was still in her eyes. But now, there was something else. Conflict. She looked at him, then at her guildmates, then back at him. She was remembering the quiet pain in his eyes, the gentle way his wounds had healed under her touch. She was seeing the boy, not just the monster. In a move that shocked everyone, especially herself, Wendy ran forward. She didn't run away from Naruto, or to her friends. She ran directly between them, spreading her arms wide. Stop, she cried, her voice ringing with a newfound strength. Don't hurt him. You don't understand. He was in pain. He was protecting me. Urza's advance halted, her eyes wide with surprise at Wendy's uncharacteristic defiance. Wendy, step aside. That thing is not stable. His name is not thing. Wendy shot back, tears welling in her eyes. He's a person, and he's alone and scared, can't you see that? The standoff was thick with tension, a silent battle of wills. Natsu looked confused, Gray looked wary, and Urza was trying to process the situation. Naruto just stared at Wendy's back, at this small, timid girl who was now shielding him from her own friends, from the only family she had. Why would she do that for him? It was in that moment of fragile, uncertain peace that a new presence arrived. There was no grand entrance, no explosion of power. Just a small, elderly man standing on the edge of the crater, his hands clasped behind his back. He wore a striped orange and blue outfit and a matching jester-like hat. Despite his diminutive stature, he possessed an aura of authority and wisdom that instantly commanded the attention of everyone present. That is quite enough, Makarov Dreyar, guild master of Fairy Tale, said, his voice calm but carrying an undeniable weight. Master, Urza exclaimed, immediately straightening up. Makarov's ancient eyes surveyed the scene, the destruction, the bodies, the terrified girl, the wary mages, and finally, the blonde-haired boy at the center of it all. His gaze lingered on Naruto. And unlike the others, he did not see a monster. He saw a hurricane in human form, a boy struggling to contain a power that could shatter the world, his eyes filled with a loneliness as vast and as deep as the ocean. He walked forward slowly, his steps silent on the disturbed earth, until he stood before Naruto and the still shielding Wendy. There has been enough violence here, he said, his voice gentle. He looked past Naruto, at the faint, shimmering disturbance in the air where Naruto had first appeared. He could sense the wrongness of it, the tear in the fabric of their reality. You are not of this world, are you, my boy? Naruto's eyes widened slightly. How could this old man know? Makarov offered a sad smile. I have lived a long time. I know the look of a soul that has lost its way home. He then looked at the power radiating from Naruto, the faint, dark echo of Acnologia's presence. He didn't flinch. He simply acknowledged it. A power like that, it is a heavy burden. It will attract fear and hatred wherever you go. It will make people see you as a weapon, or a demon to be destroyed. Every word was a hammer blow to the walls Naruto had built around his heart. This old man understood. He understood perfectly. But a power is only what its wielder makes of it, Makarov continued, his gaze unwavering. And a soul, no matter how lost, needs a place to belong. A place where it won't be feared for its strength, but embraced for it. A home. He stopped directly in front of Naruto, so close that Naruto towered over him. The old man looked up, his eyes kind but firm. Fairy Tale can be that home, if you'll have us. The offer hung in the air, stunning Natsu, Gray, and Urza into silence. Naruto stared down at the small master, then glanced at Wendy, who was now looking at him with hopeful, tear-filled eyes. A home, a family, everything he had ever wanted, offered to him by strangers in a world that was not his own. It is a trick, Acnologia snarled in his mind, sensing the shift in Naruto's resolve. Humans are insects. They will use you, and when you are no longer useful, they will betray you. It is their nature. Destroy them. Destroy them all and be free of their lies. For the first time, another feeling rose up to meet the dragon's rage. It was a small, fragile thing, but it was there. Hope. He looked at Makarov's outstretched hand, at Wendy's earnest face, at the wary but waiting guild members behind them. Maybe this time could be different. As he stood on the precipice of a decision that would change his life forever, A.C. Acnologia's voice cut through his thoughts, no longer a raging inferno, but a low, chilling whisper of warning. I sense it again, stronger now. A foul, cloying light on the edge of the world. The scent of those who hunt us. They are here, boy, and they are coming. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. A dragon's roar in a fairy's home. The walk to Magnolia was a study in tense silence and unspoken questions. Yuto fell into step slightly behind Makarov, a position born from years of shinobi training. Observe, assess, remain uncommitted. The forest, once a place of violent rebirth, now felt unnervingly calm. The lingering scent of ozone and shattered wood the only testament to the slaughter that had occurred. Urza walked on his left, her posture ramrod straight, her armored form radiating a disciplined vigilance. On his right, Natsu practically vibrated with contained energy, his eyes constantly darting towards Naruto, a predatory grin plastered on his face. The shirtless one, Gray, kept his distance, his arms crossed. His expression a mask of cold suspicion. They formed a strange, mismatched guard of honor around him, and the only point of warmth in the entire procession was Wendy, who walked just a step ahead of him, glancing back every few minutes with a small, reassuring smile that did more to soothe the snarling beast in his soul than she could ever know. Look at them, Acnologia's voice was a low, contemptuous rumble in the back of his mind. The armored one watches you as a jailer would. The stripper wants you gone. The pink-haired simpleton sees you only as a challenge, a stepping stone for his own pathetic pride. And the girl, she pities you. Their loyalty is a house of cards, boy. The first gust of wind will send it scattering. Naruto's jaw tightened. The dragon's words were venomous. But they echoed the doubts already swirling in his own mind. He had been offered a home, but he felt like a prisoner being escorted to his cell. Every friendly glance, every whispered word between the others, felt like a judgment. He was an outsider, a freak, a bomb waiting to go off in their midst. So, Natsu finally broke the silence, his voice loud in the quiet woods. That roar you did, that was dragon force, right? But it felt all wrong. What kind of dragon did you learn from? He must be one tough son of a bitch. Urza shot him a warning glare. Natsu, now is not the time. What? I'm just askin'. Natsu protested. I've never smelled anything like it. It's like a dragon, but also, like death. The observation was too accurate for comfort. Naruto's hand instinctively went to his stomach, where the new, jagged seal of Acnologia seemed to burn with a cold fire beneath his skin. I didn't learn from a dragon, he said, his voice flat. Gray scoffed. Right, and you just happy, Ned, to learn how to turn your arm into a weapon and roar loud enough to shred a man to pieces. Don't play us for fools. Gray, that's enough, Wendy said, her voice sharp, surprising everyone, including herself. She looked at Naruto, her expression apologetic. They're just not used to power like yours. They are used to weakness, Acnologia corrected. They call the flickering flames of that child power. They have never seen a true inferno. Before another argument could erupt, they crested a small hill, and the forest gave way to a breathtaking view. Below them, nestled in a valley by a wide, flowing river, was the town of Magnolia. It was a vibrant, sprawling city, its architecture a charming mix of cobblestone streets and colorful, timber-framed buildings. In the center of it all, standing proud and slightly chaotic, was a massive building with a distinctive, almost whimsical design, a large banner bearing a stylized bird-like crest fluttering in the breeze. Welcome, Makarov said, a hint of pride in his voice as he gestured towards the building. To the Fairy Tale Guild Hall. As they descended into the town, Naruto became acutely aware of the stairs. People stopped what they were doing to watch them pass. But the stairs weren't for him. They were for his escorts. People smiled, waved, and called out greetings to Natsu and Urza. Children ran up to Wendy, who knelt to speak with them kindly. The aura of fear that had followed Naruto his entire life was conspicuously absent. Here, these powerful, strange individuals were not just tolerated, they were beloved. It was a foreign, jarring concept. The guild hall was even more jarring. Makarov pushed open the massive double doors, and Naruto was hit by a wall of sound and energy. The air was thick with the smell of spilled ale, savory food, and old wood. Laughter, shouting, and the sounds of a poorly played lute filled the cavernous main hall. A chair flew through the air, narrowly missing his head, and shattered against a far wall. An act that was met with a roar of approval from a table of heavily armed mages. People were brawling in one corner, drinking themselves into a stupor in another, and in the center of it all, a dark-haired man was trying to get a cat to dance on a table. It was pure, unadulterated chaos. It was nothing like the disciplined, orderly world of Konoha's shinobi forces. It was messy, loud, and alive. Oi, Gramps is back, someone shouted, and the guild's attention shifted to them. 100 pairs of eyes landed on Naruto, the unfamiliar face in their midst. The hall quieted for a fraction of a second as they took in his tattered clothes, his wild blonde hair, and the almost palpable aura of contained violence that clung to him. Then, just as quickly, the moment was over. The brawling resumed, the drinking continued. The music picked up again. They had assessed him, deemed him not an immediate threat, and moved on. It was the most anticlimactic reception he had ever received. Makarov chuckled. Don't mind them. They're a rowdy bunch, but their hearts are in the right place. He turned to a beautiful, white-haired woman behind the bar. Mirajan, my dear, could you find our guest something to eat? He looks like he's been through a war. The woman, Mirajan, gave Naruto a smile so warm and genuine it was almost blinding. Of course, master. Right away. Naruto found himself guided to a small, out-of-the-way table. Wendy sat across from him, while Carla hopped onto the table and began fastidiously cleaning her paws. He was given a plate of food and a mug of water, and for a few minutes, He just sat there, absorbing the sheer, overwhelming normality of it all. It felt like a dream, a pleasant one that he was sure he would be violently shaken from at any moment. He didn't have to wait long. "All right, I've been patient long enough." A voice boomed. Natsu was standing on a table, his fists wreathed in flames, that manic grin back on his face. He was pointing directly at Naruto. "You, Blondie, you took out those phantom goons like they were nothing, and I felt that power you got. Stop sitting around and fight me." The guild hall erupted, not in panic, but in cheers and whoops. Bets were already being shouted. "Natsu, you idiot, he's a guest," a red-headed girl yelled. 50 jewels on Natsu, finishing it in under a minute. A man with a ridiculously long nose shouted. "You're on. The new guy looks tough." Urza sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. "Must you do this now?" "There's no better time," Natsu declared, leaping from the table and landing in a crouch in the center of the hall. It's the fairy tale way of saying hello. "So, what do you say, Blondie? You gonna fight, or are you scared?" "Pathetic child," Acnologia hissed. "His fire is an ensue. LT to the very concept of a dragon's flame. Incinerate him. Show him the glorious, world-ending fire of the apocalypse." Naruto looked from Natsu's eager, challenging face to the rest of the guild. They weren't afraid. They were excited. This wasn't a duel to the death. It was a sport. A violent, reckless, and incredibly stupid sport. He looked at Makarov, who was watching from the bar with a knowing glint in his eye. The old man wasn't going to stop this. He was allowing it. This was a test. A slow smile spread across Naruto's face. It was the first genuine smile he'd had since arriving in this world. A fight with no political stakes, no life or death consequences, no village to protect or villain to vanquish. Just a straight-up, no-holds-barred brawl. It had been a long time since he'd had one of those. He pushed his chair back and stood up. "All right, Pinky, you're on." The guild roared. Wendy looked nervous, but a part of her was curious to see what he could do when he wasn't in a blind rage. Naruto walked to the center of the room, rolling his shoulders. The exhaustion and pain from his dimensional travel had faded, replaced by the familiar, pre-fight hum of adrenaline. He fell into a loose, taijutsu stance. His hands open and ready. "Here I come," Natsu yelled, rocketing forward with a jet of flame from his feet. Fire Dragon's iron fist. His fist, engulfed in a raging inferno, flew towards Naruto's face. Naruto didn't try to block it. At the last possible second, he flickered. One moment he was there, the next he was gone, replaced by a log with a crudely painted swirl on it. The substitution jutsu was second nature. Natsu's fist smashed the log into splinters, his eyes wide with confusion. "What the?" Naruto appeared behind him, a kunai in his hand, held in a reverse grip. He didn't aim for a vital point. He tapped the flat of the blade against the back of Natsu's neck. Too slow. Natsu spun around with a roar, swinging a flaming leg in a wide arc. Fire Dragon's claw. Naruto pushed off the ground, backflipping easily over the attack. He made a single hand sign. Shadow Clone Jutsu. In a puff of smoke, a dozen identical Narutos appeared, surrounding the bewildered Dragon Slayer. The guild members stared, their jaws hanging open. "What kind of magic is that?" Gray muttered, his suspicion momentarily replaced by professional curiosity. "Solid vision. Creation magic." The clones swarmed Natsu, who responded with gleeful, chaotic violence, blasting them with fire and smashing them with his fists. But for every one he destroyed, another would take its place, landing a kick here, a punch there. It was a classic Uzumaki battle plan. Overwhelm, distract, and wear down. "Is that all you got?" Natsu roared, finally getting fed up. He slammed his hands together. Fire Dragon's roar. He inhaled deeply and unleashed a massive torrent of fire from his mouth, a conical blast that incinerated all the clones in front of him and half the tables in the guild hall. When the smoke cleared, Naruto was standing there alone, his arms crossed, an unimpressed look on his face. "Not bad," Naruto admitted. "But you put too much power into it. You left yourself wide open." Natsu grinned. "Who said I was open?" The ground beneath Naruto's feet erupted in a pillar of flame. A trap. Naruto's eyes widened in surprise as the fire engulfed him. "Gotcha," Natsu cheered. But as the flames died down, Naruto was still standing there, his tattered jacket singed but his body unharmed. A faint, dark aura was now shimmering around him, warding off the heat. The scales were back, just a faint shimmer on his forearms, but they were there. His eyes had taken on that cobalt glow again. He had subconsciously tapped into Acnologia's power to protect himself. This child's fire is an annoyance. The dragon's voice was cold. Allow me to show you how to properly extinguish it. My turn, Naruto said, his voice a lower octave than before. He disappeared, not with a flicker or a puff of smoke, but with a sheer burst of speed that left an afterimage in his place. He was faster, stronger. He appeared in front of Natsu and delivered a single, brutal punch to the gut. It wasn't powered by chakra, it was raw, draconic force. The air was driven from Natsu's lungs in a pained gasp. He was sent flying across the room, skipping off the floor like a stone on water before crashing into the bar, sending mugs and barrels everywhere. The guild fell silent. Everyone was staring. Even Urza's hand had drifted to the hilt of her sword. That wasn't a friendly spar anymore. The power behind that punch was terrifying. Natsu staggered out of the wreckage, a trickle of blood at the corner of his mouth. But he was smiling, a wild, ecstatic look in his eyes. Now that's what I'm talking about. You're strong. This is gonna be fun. His body ignited, his flames burning hotter and more intensely than before. Lightning Flame Dragon Mode. Golden lightning crackled around his crimson flames. Naruto felt the shift in power. This was serious now. He could feel Acnologia urging him on, begging him to unleash more, to show this whelp the chasm between their strengths. He took a deep breath, trying to force the dragon's influence down, but it was like trying to hold back the tide. The black scales spread further up his arms, sharp and distinct now. Lightning Flame Dragons. Natsu began, rocketing forward. His fist a combination of fire and lightning. Naruto met him halfway. He didn't use a jutsu. He didn't need one. He let the power flow. As Natsu's fist was about to connect, Naruto let out a guttural roar. The same sound he had made in the forest, but more controlled this time. It wasn't an attack, but a declaration. A wave of pure, oppressive magical pressure exploded from him. A king announcing his presence. The force of it stopped Natsu cold, his lightning flame dragon mode flickering as if caught in a hurricane. The entire guild felt it, a pressure that made it hard to breathe. A primal fear that crawled up their spines. It was the aura of an apex predator. Naruto's arm, now fully coated in glistening black scales that looked like they were forged from midnight, shot forward. His claws extended, and he swiped, not at Natsu, but at the air just beside his head. 5 black lines of energy tore through the space, silent and impossibly sharp. They didn't hit Natsu, but they carved 5 deep, perfectly parallel gouges into the stone wall 20 feet behind him. The fight was over. Natsu stood frozen, the lightning and fire gone from his body. He was staring at the wall, then back at Naruto's scaled, monstrous arm. The thrill of the fight had vanished, replaced by a dawning sense of awe and a sliver of fear. He had been completely outclassed. The silence in the guild hall was absolute. Naruto stood there, panting lightly, the draconic features slowly receding. He looked around at the faces staring at him, shock, awe, and a healthy dose of fear. He had done it again. He had wanted a simple fight, but he had ended up showing them the monster. The isolation he had felt just moments before came rushing back, colder and more bitter than before. He turned and walked away from Natsu, heading back to his secluded table, the guild members parting before him like he was a leper. He sat down, the adrenaline leaving him feeling empty and exposed. He had proven he was strong. But he had also proven he didn't belong. Fools, Acnologia sneered. Fear is the only language they truly understand. Now they will respect you. They don't respect me, Naruto thought back, a bitter ache in his chest. They're afraid of me. It's not the same. He put his head in his hands, trying to block out the stares, the whispers that were just starting to break the silence. He was alone again, in a crowded room. A small, hesitant shuffling sound brought his head up. Wendy was standing by his table, a half-eaten piece of bread in her hand. Carla was on her shoulder, her expression unreadable. Are you okay? Wendy asked softly. Naruto let out a short, mirthless laugh. Why wouldn't I be? I just trashed your guild hall and terrified your friends. Just another Tuesday for me. Wendy flinched at the bitterness in his tone, but she didn't leave. She pulled out the chair across from him and sat down. Natsu will get over it. He loves a good fight, and you gave him one. He's probably excited he has a new rival now. He looked scared, Naruto countered, unable to meet her gaze. He was surprised, Wendy corrected gently. There's a difference. What was that power? It felt old and sad. Naruto froze. Sad. No one had ever described his power as sad. Demonic, monstrous, terrifying, but never sad. He looked up at her, really looked at her. Her wide, brown eyes held no fear. Only a deep, empathetic curiosity. It's a voice, he found himself saying, the words coming out before he could stop them. A monster. It's sealed inside me. I can't control it. Not really. Like a Jinchuriki. The words were foreign to her, but she repeated what she thought she heard in his mind. Then she shook her head, correcting herself. I mean, is it like my magic? I have the spirit of my mother, Grandini. Inside me. Her magic, her will. It helps me. Naruto shook his head. This isn't like that. This thing, it doesn't want to help. It wants to destroy. It hates everything. He paused. It especially hates dragons. Wendy's eyes widened. It hates dragons. But, why? He didn't have an answer for that. He just shrugged, feeling the familiar weight of his curse settle back onto his shoulders. Just as a fragile thread of understanding was being woven between them, the great doors of the guild hall were slammed open, hitting the inside walls with a deafening crack. The chatter died instantly. Standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the bright afternoon sun, were a dozen figures in immaculate blue and white uniforms, their armor emblazoned with the crest of the Magic Council. They moved with a chilling, synchronized precision. Their leader was a young man with sharp features and light green hair, his face a stern, emotionless mask. I am Lahar of the 4th Custody Enforcement Unit of the Magic Council, he announced, his voice ringing with cold authority. By order of the Council, this guild is to be sealed pending an investigation into a catastrophic surge of Ethernano in this area. Quote, his eyes scanned the room, dismissing the powerful mages of fairy tale as if they were children, before landing directly on Naruto. His expression tightened. Quote, the magical signature we detected was on par with the activation of the Etherian cannon. It originated from this location. We have reason to believe you, he pointed a gloved finger at Naruto, are the source of that disturbance. You will come with us for questioning. Now, the air grew thick with hostility. The idea of the council taking one of their own, even a brand new, terrifyingly powerful one, was anathema to every member of Fairy Tail. Like hell he is, Gray snarled, ice already forming around his hands. Urza stepped forward, reequipping into her adamantine armor. The council is not welcome here, Lahar. You will leave. Lahar didn't even flinch. Resisting the council is a Class S crime, Urza Scarlet. Are you prepared for Fairy Tail to be disbanded? The guild members hesitated. The threat was real. But then, Natsu, bruised but not broken, stepped forward to stand beside Urza, a low growl rumbling in his chest. He's with us. You want him. You gotta go through all of us. One by one, the others stood. Macau, Wakaba, Kana, Levi, Jet, Droy. The entire guild, a chaotic, dysfunctional, but fiercely loyal family, formed a human wall between the council and Naruto's table. They were ready to fight their own government for a boy they had known for less than an hour. Naruto watched, his heart pounding in his chest. This was insane. In Konoha, he had been the scapegoat, the weapon to be pointed, the pariah to be shunned. If the council's equivalent had come for him there, the village elders would have handed him over with a bow. But here, these people, these strangers, were willing to risk everything for him. Their sentimentality will be their undoing, Acnologia scoffed. This is the weakness I spoke of. Flee while they distract these uniformed fools. But Naruto wasn't listening. He was watching Wendy, who stood with her friends, her small body trembling but her jaw set with determination. He was watching Natsu, who was giving him a quick grin over his shoulder, a look that said, see. This is who we are. He was watching Makarov, whose eyes held a silent promise, you are one of us now. We protect our own. A feeling he hadn't felt in a long time began to swell within him. A warmth. A sense of belonging. Slowly, he stood up. He placed a hand on Wendy's shoulder as he passed, a silent thank you. He walked through the line of his new guildmates, who watched him with surprise. He didn't stop until he was standing in front of them all, facing Lahar and the Rune Knights alone. He looked the council captain dead in the eye. His power wasn't flaring, his eyes weren't glowing, and his arms weren't covered in scales. He was just a boy, standing calm and resolute against an armed force. But the sheer presence he commanded, the unshakable confidence in his stance, made him seem more imposing than any monster. "You want to question me?" Naruto said, his voice quiet but carrying across the silent hall. "Fine, but we do it here. And you put your weapons down." It wasn't a request, it was a command, and in the stunned silence that followed, everyone in the room, from the Rune Knights to the mages of fairy tale to the ancient dragon sealed within his soul, knew that a king had just spoken. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. Whispers of the Black Dragon. The confrontation with the Magic Council ended not with a bang, but with a tense, bureaucratic whimper. Makarov, leveraging a combination of folksy charm, veiled threats, and an encyclopedic knowledge of council bylaws, had managed to de-escalate the situation. Lahar and his Rune Knights had withdrawn, but their departure felt less like a retreat and more like a tactical repositioning. Naruto was no longer just an anomaly. He was a person of interest, a file on a desk, a name on a list. The eye of the government was now fixed upon him, and it was a heavy, unnerving gaze. The guild hall, once a chaotic symphony of life, was subdued in the aftermath. The members tried to return to their usual antics, but a palpable tension lingered. They glanced at Naruto not with the easy camaraderie of the day before, but with a new, complicated mixture of respect, awe, and a definite undercurrent of fear. He faced down both Natsu Dragneel and the Magic Council on his first day, and while that earned him a certain legendary status, it also wrapped him in an aura of dangerous unpredictability. He was one of them, yes. But he was also fundamentally other. He sat at the same secluded table, a fresh mug of water in front of him, the din of the hall feeling a million miles away. Acnologia was quiet, epping Leviathan in the depths of his soul, but Naruto could feel the dragon's smug satisfaction. The fear of the others was a balm to its ancient, hateful pride. For Naruto, it was just another layer of isolation. Ahem. Makarov's voice cut through his brooding. The small guild master had pulled up a stool, a serious expression on his aged face. Wendy, Natsu, and a blonde-haired girl with a set of keys on her belt, Lucy. He vaguely recalled from the commotion, stood behind him. "The council will be watching you, my boy," Makarov began, his voice low. "They fear what they don't understand, and they don't understand you in the slightest. The best thing for now is to lay low, to integrate. Show them, and everyone else, that you are not the weapon they fear you are." Naruto snorted. "And how am I supposed to do that?" "By sitting in a corner and trying not to scare anyone." "By being a fairy tale wizard," Makarov corrected, a twinkle in his eye. "And a fairy tale wizard's purpose is to help people. Which brings me to this." He slid a piece of paper across the table. "A mission request." Lucy leaned forward, reading it over his shoulder. "A village in the foothills of Mount Hako. They're as king for an investigation into a mysterious, sleeping sickness. They're offering 200,000 jewel. That'll cover my rent for almost 3 months. The client is an old friend," Makarov said. "The situation sounds delicate. It requires a team with a range of skills. Power, analysis, and compassion." His gaze rested pointedly on each of them in turn. Natsu for power, Lucy for analysis, and Wendy for compassion. His look towards Naruto was more complex, as if he embodied all and none of them at once. "Team Natsu is our best. I want you to accompany them, Naruto." Natsu pumped a fist. "All right, a mission. Time to bust some heads and wake some people up." Naruto looked at the request, then at the expectant faces of the team. It was a transparent ploy to get him out of Magnolia, away from the council's immediate glare. But it was also an olive branch, an invitation to participate, to be part of the whole. It was a chance to prove he was more than just the monster. "Fine," he said, pushing the paper back towards them. "I'm in." The train ride was an assault on the senses. The rhythmic clatter of the wheels on the track, the lurching motion, the press of too many bodies in the carriage. For Naruto, who was used to traveling at treetop speeds, the pace was agonizingly slow. For Natsu, it was pure torture. The mighty fire dragon slayer was reduced to a green-faced, groaning heap, his HEA. D in Lucis' lap as she tried to comfort him, looking thoroughly disgusted. "I don't get it," Naruto said, staring at the miserable Natsu. "You're a dragon slayer. You can eat fire and punch through walls. But you can't handle a little movement. It's a common weakness for all dragon slayers," Wendy explained from the seat beside him. She was looking much more relaxed now, away from the charged atmosphere of the guild. "Something about our enhanced senses doesn't agree with transportation. It's pathetic is what it is," Carla sniffed from her perch on Wendy's lap. Naruto found himself seated opposite Lucy and across from Wendy. A proximity that was both comforting and awkward. Lucy kept trying to engage him in conversation, asking questions about his magic, with a writer's insatiable curiosity. "So that thing you did, with the copies of yourself, is that illusion magic?" she asked, her brown eyes bright with interest. "Because they seemed so solid. And the spinning ball of, whatever that was, is it a type of wind magic?" Quote, he deflected with vague, one-word answers, a habit ingrained from a lifetime of keeping secrets. "Something like that," he'd grunt, before turning to stare out the window at the passing countryside. This world was lush, green, and vibrant, untouched by the scars of the great ninja wars that had defined his own. Acnologia's voice slithered into his thoughts, dripping with boredom. "The prattling of these insects is grating. Why do you entertain it? You should be training, honing my power, not wasting time on this pointless journey." Naruto focused on the girl sitting next to him instead. Wendy was quiet, content to simply watch the landscape. He noticed she was clutching a small pouch of herbs, the same kind he'd seen her gathering in the forest. "What kind of magic is yours, really?" he asked, his voice softer than he intended. "The healing, I've never seen anything like it." Wendy brightened, happy to talk about her craft. "It's Sky Dragon Slayer magic. It's not just for healing. I can use enchantments to support my friends, to make them faster or stronger. And I can attack with wind, too," she added, a little shyly. "Grandini, my mother, taught me that the sky gives life, protects, and can be fierce when it needs to be. My magic is meant to help people, heal, support." Her power was the complete antithesis of the one festering inside him. "Mine is for destruction," he said, the words tasting like ash. "That's all it knows. That's all it wants." Wendy looked at him, her expression thoughtful. "But you used it to protect me. And you used it to protect the guild from the council. A power is just a tool. The hand that wields it is what matters, right?" Her simple, unwavering faith was a pinprick of light in his internal darkness. He didn't have a reply for that. He just watched as the verdant plains gave way to rolling hills, the shadow of a great, snow-capped mountain looming in the distance. The village of Oakhaven was nestled in a quiet valley. And it was immediately, unnervingly silent. There was no smoke rising from the chimneys, no children playing in the single dirt road, no farmers tending to the fields of ripening wheat. The only sound was the rustle of the wind through the trees, which seemed to whisper mournful secrets. An old man, his face a roadmap of worry and sleepless nights, met them at the edge of the village. He introduced himself as Mayor Bacchus. "Thank you for coming, wizards of fairy tale," he said, his voice trembling slightly. We didn't know who else to turn to." He led them to one of the small, timber-framed houses. Inside, a family, a mother, a father, 2 small children, lay in their beds. Their chests rose and fell with shallow breaths, their faces peaceful, as if in a deep sleep. But it wasn't sleep. Their skin was pale, their limbs limp, and a faint, sickly gray aura clung to them, visible even to Naruto's untrained eye. "We call it the Whispering Blight," the mayor explained, his voice cracking. "It started a week ago. One person fell ill, then another. Now, almost the entire village is like this. They don't wake up. They don't eat. It's like their very souls are fading away." Wendy rushed to the bedside of the youngest child, her hands glowing with her soft, teal magic. She placed them over the girl's chest, her brow furrowed in concentration. After a moment, she pulled back, shaking her head. "It's not an illness, she said, her voice grave. I can feel her life force, but it's being drained. Something is slowly siphoning her magic away. Natsu, his motion sickness forgotten, growled low in his throat. So some bastard is using these people like a walking buffet. When I find him, I'm gonna cook him from the inside out. Naruto walked through the house, his senses on high alert. He could feel it now, a subtle, parasitic presence in the air. It was a dark, cloying magic, and it felt disturbingly familiar. It resonated with the power sealed within him, like two tuning forks of the same malevolent frequency. This magic, it is crude, primitive, Acnologia observed in his mind, a flicker of cold interest stirring within him. But the principle is the same. Domination, consumption, the strong feeding on the weak. It is the purest law of nature. This mage, for all his weakness, understands the truth of the world. The suggestion was horrifying. Naruto looked at the sleeping family, at their peaceful, vulnerable faces. They were just ordinary people, caught in the crossfire of some mage's ambition. His hands clenched into fists. He would not, could not, see this as natural. The team split up to search the village for clues. Lucy, with her analytical mind, discovered faint, almost invisible magical runes painted on the doorframes of every house. Natsu, with his dragon's nose, sniffed out a trail of the dark magic leading away from the village square. It led them to the oldest building in Oakhaven, a stone church on a small hill overlooking the town. The place felt wrong. The air was colder here, heavy with the stench of the draining curse. Natsu tried the heavy oak doors, but they were sealed tight with powerful magic. Stand back, he grunted, his fist igniting. Wait, Naruto said, placing a hand on his shoulder. He stepped up to the door, his own senses tingling. He could feel the flow of magical energy in the seal. It was a complex, interlocking weave. Brute force would only make it stronger. But it had a keyhole, a central point where all the lines of power converged. He held his palm up to that point. He didn't push. He just listened. He let Acnologia's predatory instincts guide him. The dragon within saw the seal not as a barrier, but as a knot to be unraveled. A small, dark wisp of Naruto's own magical energy flowed from his palm. Not attacking the seal, but mimicking it, vibrating at the same frequency, and then twisting, just slightly. It was like picking a lock with a key made of shadow. There was a soft click, and the immense pressure of the magical seal vanished. The heavy doors swung open with a low groan. Natsu, Lucy, and Wendy stared, their mouths agape. How did you do that? Lucy breathed, looking from the door to Naruto's impassive face. The lock was old, Naruto said simply, walking inside. The interior of the church was a mess of desecrated pews and scattered prayer books. At the far end, where the altar should have been, the floor had been torn up, revealing a stone staircase spiraling down into darkness. The source of the dark magic was below. They descended into a vast, circular chamber, lit by the eerie glow of magical crystals. The room was a laboratory from a nightmare. Arcane diagrams covered the floor, strange alchemical equipment bubbled on tables, and in the center of it all was a massive ritual circle, pulsing with a sickly gray light. Strands of that same light snaked out from the circle, leading up through the ceiling towards the village above. Dozens of them, one for every sleeping villager. A man in dark, scholarly robes stood with his back to them, his hands raised over the circle as he chanted in a low, guttural language. So, the man said without turning around, his voice calm and academic. The village flies have brought bigger insects to my web. A shame, I was so close to the culmination of my work. He turned, and Naruto felt a jolt. The man was young, with sharp, intelligent eyes and an air of detached arrogance. He wasn't a monster in appearance. He was a scholar, a researcher, and that somehow made him even more terrifying. Who are you? Urza would have demanded. Naruto didn't bother. Let the villagers go, he said. It was a simple, cold statement of fact. The mage chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. Let them go. Why would I do that? They are my batteries, my fuel source. Their trivial magical energies, a drop for each of them, will become an ocean for me. An ocean that will grant me immortality, a power to rival the gods. You're killing them for your own selfish ambition. Lucy shouted, pulling out one of her golden gate keys. That's unforgivable, unforgivable. The mage, Eligor too, raised an eyebrow. Is it? The world is awash with wasted potential. Farmers, bakers, children, their magic is a candle flame in the dark, guttering out with their short, meaningless lives. I am merely collecting that light, concentrating it. Is it selfish for the shepherd to shear the sheep for their wool? I am ushering in a new era of existence, and all it costs is the wasted energy of those who would never know what to do with it. His logic was twisted, warped, but it was delivered with such conviction that it gave them pause. He speaks the truth, Acnologia whispered, his voice resonating with Elagor's philosophy. Existence is a hierarchy. The powerful ascend, the weak are consumed. He understands. Absorb him. Absorb his research. This power he has gathered, it could be yours. The temptation was a physical thing, a hook in Naruto's soul. He could feel the massive reservoir of life energy pulsating from the ritual circle. It called to the emptiness inside him, the part of him that was now a dragon. The power to level mountains was already his. But this was the power of life itself. He could take it. He could become a god. He saw Wendy's horrified face, her hands clenched at her sides as she stared at the mage. He saw the sleeping faces of the children. The hook in his soul loosened. No, Naruto said, his voice a low growl. You're just a thief, making excuses for your own greed. Elagor sighed, as if disappointed in a slow student. So be it. I had hoped you, of all people, would understand. He snapped his fingers. The shadows in the corners of the room coalesced, forming into lumbering golems of stone and dark magic. Keep them busy, my children. I am on the verge of a breakthrough. Let's go. Happy. Natsu yelled, rocketing forward with his talking blue cat. I'm all fired up. The fight was a blur of motion and color. Natsu's flames clashed with the dark energy of the golems. Lucy summoned Taurus, her powerful celestial spirit, who slammed into the constructs with his massive axe. Wendy stayed back, chanting enchantments to increase Natsu's speed and power. Naruto ignored the golems. He moved, a silent shadow, his target the mage himself. Elagor met his advance with a wave of his hand, sending a bolt of the gray, life-draining energy directly at him. Naruto didn't dodge, he let it hit him. The magic latched onto him, trying to siphon his life force, his chakra, his very soul. It was like a piranha trying to swallow a great white shark. Acnologia roared in his mind, not with pain, but with outrage and a terrifying hunger. The dragon's power surged, a black tide rising to meet the gray stream. It didn't just block the attack, it latched onto it, reversing the flow. Naruto could feel the stolen life energy of the villagers pouring into him through the connection. Elagor's eyes widened in shock. What? How are you doing that? You should be a withered husk. He poured more power into his spell, but it was like trying to fill an ocean with a bucket. Naruto grit his teeth, the scales beginning to crawl up his arms. The raw, unfiltered life force of dozens of souls was flooding his system. It was intoxicating. He could feel his power swelling, the whispers of Acnologia turning into a triumphant scream in his mind. Yes, take it all, devour them, become the god he only dreams of being. He roared, a sound of both agony and ecstasy, and pushed the energy back, shattering Elagor's spell. The backlash sent the dark mage staggering back, clutching his chest. That power, Elagor gasped, staring at Naruto's glowing, slitted eyes and scaled arms. It's not human. It's the power of the end. The power of the black dragon. Before Naruto could press his attack, Elagor slammed his hands down on the ritual circle. You've forced my hand, monster. If I cannot have this power in a controlled ascension, then I will take it all in one glorious, chaotic flood. The entire chamber began to shake. The light from the circle intensified, turning from a dull gray to a blinding, soul-searing white. The strands of energy connected to the villagers began to pull, draining them 100 times faster. The villagers. Wendy cried out in alarm. He's killing them all at once. She ran towards the circle, her hands glowing, trying to push her own healing energy into the matrix to counteract the drain. But she was one small stream fighting against a raging river. The feedback threw her back, and she cried out in pain. Seeing Wendy hurt was the lightning strike that cleared the storm in Naruto's mind. The temptation, the hunger, Acnologia's voice, it all vanished, replaced by a single, sharp crystalline purpose. He would not become a god. He would not become a monster. He would protect his friends. He moved, appearing at Wendy's side in an instant, shielding her from the pulsating energy of the circle. He looked at the crazed, triumphant face of Eligor, at the swirling vortex of stolen souls. He knew what he had to do. He wasn't strong enough to control Acnologia's full power yet. But he didn't have to control it. He just had to aim it. You want destruction, he thought, speaking directly to the beast within. Fine, I'll give you destruction. He held out his right hand, channeling not just his own chakra, but the raw, chaotic, world-ending magic of the Black Dragon. A sphere of violent, swirling energy began to form in his palm. It was a Rasengan, but it was unlike any he had ever created. It was not blue, or indigo, or even red. It was a perfect sphere of absolute black, a miniature hole in the universe that seemed to drink the very light from the room. It did not hum with power. It was utterly silent, the silence of the void. What is that? Eligor whispered, his triumph turning to primal fear. Naruto didn't answer. He looked at the ritual circle, the engine of the mage's madness. With a final, guttural roar, he slammed his hand down. Dragon's maelstrom. There was no explosion, no sound, no shockwave, at first. There was only absence. The black sphere touched the glowing lines of the ritual, and the light simply ceased to exist. The intricate runes, the stored magical energy, the very concept of the spell was eaten. Consumed by the perfect, silent hunger of the void. Then the universe snapped back. A wave of pure force, the backlash from so much power being unridden from reality, erupted from the point of impact. It wasn't an explosion of fire or wind, but a wave of pure kinetic energy that blasted the remains of the golems to dust, shattered the alchemical equipment, and threw Eligor against the far wall with enough force to crack the stone. The entire underground chamber groaned, the ceiling cracking and collapsing. The cave is coming down. Lucy screamed. Natsu grabbed the unconscious Eligor, and Gray, having arrived after finishing his own fight, created a thick ice shield above their heads to protect them from the falling debris. Naruto grabbed Wendy, whose eyes were wide with a mixture of terror and awe, and followed them out, racing up the collapsing staircase just as the entire church imploded behind them. They emerged into the afternoon sun, covered in dust, to find the village stirring. People were coming out of their homes, groggy and confused, but alive. The sickly gray aura that had hung over the town was gone. They were saved. Many of the villagers had seen the brilliant flash of light from the church, had felt the tremor as it collapsed. They now stared at the small group of wizards, and particularly at Naruto, who stood panting in the rubble, the last of the black scales fading from his skin. They looked at him with gratitude, but also with a deep, instinctual fear of the boy who could command such a terrifying, silent destruction. Later, as they waited for the transport that would take the now powerless Eligor into council custody, the scene shifted. Miles away, in a dark, secure holding cell on a moving train, the defeated mage was chained to a wall. A shimmering, ethereal form began to coalesce in front of him. It was a woman of impossible beauty, her form made of starlight, her eyes holding the cold infinity of space. Lyra, such a bold attempt, her voice as a celestial song that echoed in his soul. To become a god using the dregs of mortal power. Commendable, but so very limited. Eligor looked up, his eyes wide with fear and reverence. What are you? A purveyor of true power, she said, a cruel smile playing on her lips. She extended a hand, and a single mote of brilliant, divine light floated towards him. You sought to collect the candles of mortals. I offer you a piece of a sun. Serve us, and you will wield power you cannot even imagine. Desperate and broken, Eligor lunged for the light, accepting it into his being. He screamed as the celestial energy overrode his own, his eyes burning until they glowed with a pure, white light. His ambition had not died, it had merely found a new, and far more dangerous, master. Unaware of this ominous development, Naruto sat on the train heading back to Magnolia. He stared out the window, watching the blur of green fields and distant mountains. He had saved the village, but the cost was a deeper understanding of the abyss he now carried. He had tasted a power that could consume souls, and a part of him had liked it. He felt a small presence sit beside him. It was Wendy. She didn't say anything. She didn't offer platitudes or ask questions. She just sat there, her quiet, steady presence a silent anchor in his turbulent inner world. For now, it was enough. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The Song of the Celestial Arbiter. The return to Fairy Tail was not the triumphant homecoming Natsu had boisterously predicted. The story of Oakhaven arrived before they did, a garbled mess of rumor and tavern gossip that painted a terrifying picture. They hadn't just defeated a dark mage, they had annihilated a church, collapsed a hillside, and unleashed a power that had made the very earth tremble. And at the center of every wild tale was the new blonde kid. The monster. Naruto felt the shift the moment he walked through the Guildhall doors. The usual boisterous greetings were there for Team Natsu, but when eyes turned to him, the welcome died, conversations stuttered, a few of the younger members flinched back, their expressions a mixture of awe and raw, undiluted fear. He had saved a village, and in doing so, had proven himself to be exactly the kind of destructive force they had first suspected him to be. He was a walking natural disaster, a caged calamity that they had foolishly welcomed into their home. He retreated to his now customary table in the corner, a silent island in the sea of nervous energy he had created. Wendy brought him a drink, her smile a small, defiant beacon in the gloom. But even her kindness couldn't penetrate the wall of ice that was reforming around his heart. See, Acnologia's voice was a smug whisper, a serpent coiling in the back of his mind. This is the gratitude of humans. They praise you for your power, and in the same breath, they curse you for it. They are fickle, foolish creatures. Their fear is the only honest thing about them. Naruto didn't reply, he just stared into his mug, the cheerful chaos of the Guildhall feeling like a party he was watching from outside a window in the pouring rain. The real poison began to seep in over the next few days. It started subtly. A shopkeeper in the market who was suddenly, all out, of the produce Mirajan had sent him to buy. A group of children who stopped their game and ran when he walked past. Cold shoulders in the streets. Whispers that died the moment he turned his head. Magnolia, the town that had seemed so warm and welcoming, was growing cold. Then, the chill began to infect the guild itself. The hostility wasn't directed at him, not at first. It was aimed at Fairy Tail as a whole. Macau and Wakaba got into a brawl at their favorite bar after being accused of harboring a demon. Jet and Droy were refused service at a restaurant, the owner muttering about not wanting their kind of trouble. The town's goodwill, the love and respect they had earned, was eroding like a cliff in a storm. And at the center of that storm was him. The breaking point came a week after the Oakhaven mission. He was walking back from a solitary training session in the woods, trying to get a better handle on the volatile energy that now flowed through his veins instead of chakra. As he entered the town square, he saw a crowd gathered. In the center, a baker was shouting, his face purple with rage, pointing a flour-dusted finger at Levi McGarden and a tearful Lucy. Your monster almost leveled the whole town. And you just let him walk around like he's one of you. What's to stop him from TTING angry and wiping Magnolia off the map? Fairy Tail has gone too far this time. He saved those people, Lucy argued, her voice trembling with indignation. He's a menace. Another voice yelled from the crowd. A demon in human skin. The words were a physical blow, each one a phantom punch that landed with the weight of his entire childhood. Demon, monster, menace. He had fled a world of hat. Red only to find himself recreating it in this new one. He was the problem. His power, his very presence, was a curse that tainted everything it touched. He turned before they could see him, melting back into the shadows of the alleyways. The baker's vitriol echoing in his ears. Acnologia was silent, but he didn't need to speak. Naruto could feel the dragon's dark amusement, its profound, all-encompassing, I told you so. That night, he made his decision. He waited until the guild hall was quiet, the last of the late-night drinkers having staggered home. The building was asleep, breathing softly around him. He packed nothing. He had arrived with nothing but the tattered clothes on his back, and he would leave the same way. He scribbled a short, crude note, leaving it on his table. Thanks for everything. Sorry for the trouble. He was a ghost, a shinobi trained to move without a sound. He slipped through the empty hall, his feet silent on the wooden floorboards. The great doors were his final obstacle. He put his hand on the heavy wood, a strange ache in his chest. He was leaving the first place that had ever felt remotely like a home, and the choice was tearing him apart. But it was the right choice. The only choice. And where do you think you're going? The voice was soft, but it cut through the silence like a shard of glass. He froze, his hand still on the door. He turned slowly. Wendy was standing at the foot of the staircase to the second floor, her arms crossed, her small frame silhouetted by the moonlight streaming through the high windows. Carla stood beside her, her expression uncharacteristically grim. There was no timidity in Wendy's stance, no fear in her eyes. Only a deep, unyielding disappointment. "I'm leaving," Naruto said, his voice a low rasp. "It's for the best. The town, the trouble, it's all because of me. If I'm gone, it will stop." "You're a coward," she said, the words sharp and clear. Naruto flinched as if she'd slapped him. "What?" "I said, you're a coward," she repeated, taking a step forward, her voice gaining strength with every word. "You think running away is the noble thing to do. You think you're protecting us by abandoning us. You're not. You're insulting us. You're telling us we're too weak to stand by our friends when things get tough. You don't understand," he growled, a flicker of anger rising to mask his hurt. "They hate me. They fear me. As long as I'm here, you'll all be targets." "So what?" she shot back, her voice ringing in the empty hall. "We're fairy tale. We're always targets. We get into fights, we break things, we make enemies. That's who we are, and we do it together. Did you think we'd just roll over and let some angry villagers dictate who gets to be in our family?" She was in front of him now, her small fists clenched at her sides. Her eyes blazing with a fire he had never seen before. This wasn't the gentle healer from the forest. This was a dragon slayer, and she was fighting for one of her own. "I saw you in that church, Naruto," she continued, her voice softening slightly, but losing none of its intensity. "I saw you being tempted by all that power. I felt the darkness in you, the voice that was telling you to take it. But you didn't. You chose to save those people. You chose to save me. That's who you are, not the monster the villagers see, and not the monster that voice in your head tells you that you are. You're the one who chose to do the right thing, even when it was hard." Her words stripped away his defenses, layer by layer. He had been so focused on the fear he inspired, that he had forgotten the reason he had used his power in the first place. "Your home isn't something you can just run away from to protect it," she finished, her voice thick with emotion. She reached out and grabbed the sleeve of his jacket, her grip surprisingly strong. "Your home is something you stay and fight for. And your home is here. With me. With all of us." He stared down at her, at a small girl who possessed a strength of heart that dwarfed his own immense power. He had come here to protect her, and now she was the one saving him from himself. The walls he had so carefully rebuilt crumbled to dust. A single, hot tear traced a path through the grime on his cheek. "Okay," he whispered, the word feeling impossibly heavy. "Okay, I'll stay." A relieved smile broke through her tears, and for the first time, she launched herself forward, wrapping her arms around his waist in a fierce, desperate hug. Awkwardly, tentatively, he brought his own arms up, returning the embrace. It felt warm, right, sentiment. Acnologia grumbled in his mind, but the word lacked its usual venom. It was almost contemplative. Their moment was shattered by a loud crash from the main hall, followed by a roar of rage. They broke apart, spinning around to see the lights flicker on. The guild wasn't empty. Dozens of members were there, and they were fighting. But they were fighting each other. Gra, Y and Natsu were locked in a furious brawl, their attacks no longer playful, but filled with genuine malice. Ice and fire flew with killing intent. Across the room, Elfman, in his full beast soul form, had Macau pinned to a table, roaring about what it meant to be a man. Kana was screaming at a stoic guildarts who had just returned, accusing him of being a deadbeat father, her words laced with a venom that went beyond normal frustration. Old grievances, petty rivalries, and deep-seated insecurities had all boiled to the surface, turning the guild hall into a war zone of friend against friend. "What's happening?" Wendy cried, horrified. Over the din of the fighting, a sound began to register, a melody that had been hiding beneath the chaos. It was a beautiful, ethereal song, seemingly coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. It was a tune of haunting clarity, but as Naruto focused on it, he could feel the wrongness of it. The music was designed to bypass the ears and resonate directly with the soul. It was a melody that found the cracks in your heart, the hidden resentments and fears, and pried them open, amplifying them until they consumed everything else. Levi and Lucy were huddled behind the bar, their hands over their ears, trying to work. Levi was frantically scribbling on a piece of paper. "It's the music," Levi shouted over the noise. "It's a form of sonic enchantment. She's forcing everyone to act on their worst impulses. We can't find the source," Lucy yelled, dodging a flying beer stein. Naruto's eyes scanned the room. The power behind the song was immense, but subtle. It wasn't an overt attack. It was a poison of the spirit. He could feel it trying to work on him, trying to latch onto Acnologia's endless well of hatred and his own deep-seated loneliness. But the dragon's misanthropy was so absolute, so pure, that the song found no specific grievance to amplify. It was like trying to add a single drop of poison to an ocean of it. And Wendy's words, her fierce declaration of his place here, had just forged a new, powerful shield around his heart. He saw Natsu send a blazing fist towards Gray's unprotected face, a move that would cripple him. He saw Urza, her body trembling with the effort of resisting the song, her sword arm twitching as she fought the urge to strike down her own comrades for their lack of discipline. He saw the family he had just decided to fight for tearing itself apart, and a different kind of rage began to build in him. A cold, clear, protective fury. Then, she appeared. On the grand balcony of the second floor, a figure of celestial light and impossible beauty materialized. It was Lyra. She wasn't singing with her mouth. The music simply emanated from her very being, a divine, corrupting aura. Such fragile bonds. Lyra's voice was the song itself. A chorus of condescending pity. So easily broken. "Look at you, children of Earth Land. Squabbling, hateful insects, just as he always said you were." Her cold, starlit eyes fixed on Naruto. "And you, abomination, you who house the soul of the great betrayer. Do you see now? This is the family you chose. This is the humanity you cling to. They are nothing." Her song intensified. Urza cried out, her willpower finally failing as she raised her sword against a cowering Bisca. "Stop it." Naruto's voice was a low growl. Lyra smiled, a slow, cruel curve of her lips. "Why should I? This is their true nature. I am merely letting them be themselves." "I said," Naruto began, his body beginning to shimmer with a dark, oppressive power, the black scales of the dragon creeping up his neck. His eyes burning with cobalt fire. "Stop it." He didn't attack her. He didn't use a jutsu. He simply opened his mouth and roared. It was not the sound of destruction he had used in the forest. It was not the roar of dominance he had used against Natsu. This was a roar of pure, incandescent will. It was the sound of a soul refusing to be broken, of a boy declaring his absolute claim over his home and his family. It was a wave of raw, unfiltered emotion, fury, loyalty, and a fierce, protective love, given voice and power. It was the maelstrom refusing to bow to the heavens. His roar was a counter-frequency, a dissonant, human cry of defiance against her perfect, celestial song. The two forces met in the middle of the guild hall, and for a moment, the very air seemed to tear. Lyra's eyes widened in shock, her serene composure finally breaking. Her song, her divine, soul-crushing magic, was being shredded. Overwhelmed, drowned out by the sheer, stubborn force of a mortal's will. Naruto's roar reached a crescendo, and the celestial melody shattered like a glass sculpture dropped from a great height. Silence. The fighting stopped. Natsu froze, his fist inches from Gray's face. Urza's sword clattered to the floor. The guild members looked around, dazed and confused, as if waking from a terrible nightmare. They looked at their bruised knuckles, their terrified friends, and the devastation of their home. With dawning horror, on the balcony, Lyra staggered back, a thin trickle of golden ichor leaking from her nose. She stared at Naruto, her expression no longer one of condescending pity, but of disbelief and a flicker of something that looked like fear. "Impossible," she whispered. "A mere human soul should not have such will." She looked at the now united guild, at the way Wendy was already at Naruto's side, her healing magic glowing, at the way Natsu and Gray were now standing back to back, facing her. Her weapon had failed. Her plan was in ruins. With a final, hateful glare at Naruto, her form dissolved into a shower of starlight. The threat was gone, but the knowledge of it remained, a scar on the heart of the guild. Naruto stood panting in the center of the room. The dragon's scales receding. The guild was silent, staring at him. But this time, the fear was gone. It was replaced by a profound, humbled gratitude. He hadn't just saved them. He had saved them from themselves. He had roared, and in doing so, had claimed his place among them, once and for all. He was no longer just the monster in the corner. He was their monster. Chapter 4 End. Ch. Chapter 5. A glimpse of the Maelstrom's heart. The days following Lyra's attack were marked by a strange, newfound clarity within the fairy tale guild. The songstress of the celestial arbiters had stripped away their pretenses, forcing them to confront their own latent resentments. In the aftermath, the usual brawls returned, but they were cleaner, punctuated by a deeper respect and quicker apologies. The guild had been tested not by external foes, but by internal corruption, and Naruto had been the unlikely, roaring anchor that had pulled them back from the brink. He was now, unequivocally, one of them. His status changed immediately. The suspicion in the eyes of the townspeople, orchestrated by Lyra's subtle enchantments, faded quickly once the source of the discord vanished. In the guild, the hesitant respect was replaced by a more familiar, chaotic adoration. Natsu, recovered from his enforced rage, immediately declared Naruto his eternal rival and started following him around like a shadow, demanding rematches. Urza's vigilance softened into a quiet, protective understanding. And with Wendy, the subtle emotional barrier that had existed between them dissolved. Their bond was no longer defined by her pity for his loneliness or his duty to protect her. It had matured into a genuine, deeply felt connection forged in a moment of existential crisis. Their training sessions became a central part of their new routine. They would steal away to a secluded, rocky shore outside Acnologia, a place where the sound of Naruto's explosions wouldn't alarm the entire town. It was in these sessions that Wendy truly began to evolve. "You're still fighting yourself," Naruto observed one afternoon, watching as Wendy tried to execute a more powerful sky dragon's roar. The blast of air was strong, but it lacked the focused, devastating impact he knew she was capable of. "It's hard," she admitted, wiping a stray strand of blue hair from her face. "Grandini's power is about support, defense, not raw destruction. It feels like I'm fighting against my own nature." Naruto walked over to her, his expression intense. "You're thinking too much about what your magic should be. You're the Sky Dragon Slayer, not a water pipe. The sky isn't just gentle clouds, Wendy. It's also typhoons and cyclones. That gentleness you have, that's your anchor. It's what makes your magic clean. But you need to let the storm out." He demonstrated, not with the maelstrom, but with a basic, concentrated blast of his new, draconic power, a dragon's claw that scored a trench 10 feet deep in the solid rock. The power was immense, but it was also controlled, focused by his shinobi training. "Feel the storm," he instructed. "Don't ask the magic to work. Tell it, you're the dragon. You command the sky." Wendy watched him, her eyes wide, a new determination setting in. She closed her eyes, and this time, she didn't just chant. She felt the air around her, the immense, quiet power of the open sky. When she opened her eyes, they were no longer brown, but a brilliant, fierce blue. She roared, and the blast that erupted from her mouth was no longer a conical burst of air. It was a focused, spiraling vortex. A miniature typhoon that didn't just strike the target rock, it vaporized it, leaving a clean, perfectly circular hole in the cliff face. She stared at the result, her breath catching in her throat. I did it." "You did more than that," Naruto said, a genuine smile of pride on his face. "You found the fierce part of your gentle heart." The training quickly shifted. He taught her how to weave her enchantments in the middle of a fight, using them as a shield or a sudden boost of speed to evade. She, in turn, used her incredible healing ability to mend the wounds he constantly inflicted upon himself as he wrestled for control over Acnologia. During one of their breaks, sitting on the warm sand, she gently placed her hand on his cheek, using her magic to soothe the chronic headache the Black Dragon's constant presence gave him. The soft, teal glow of her sky magic was the only thing that could consistently calm the ancient, churning rage inside him. He's quieter when you're around, Naruto confessed, leaning into her touch. It's like, your light is too much for his shadow to handle. He's just lonely, Wendy said softly, her eyes holding the deep empathy that had first drawn him in. Like you were, he just expresses his pain through hatred, instead of sadness. He hates everything, Naruto said, a heavy sigh escaping his lips. Especially people who use Dragon Slayer magic. He's always telling me to kill you. Quote, and you don't, she countered, her hand moving to stroke his wild, blonde hair. That's what matters. Your will is stronger than his hatred. It was in that quiet, vulnerable moment, their faces inches apart, her hand tracing the faint scar that ran from his cheek, that the world seemed to narrow to just the two of them. The warmth of her touch, the genuine affection in her eyes, broke down the last of his emotional defenses. He leaned in, closing the final space between them. Their kiss was tentative at first, a gentle acknowledgement, a soft press of lips that tasted of salt air and shared secrets. Then it deepened, a silent confirmation of a bond that had been forming since their first meeting in the forest. It wasn't a whirlwind, passionate Hollywood moment, it was a simple, profound, and deeply human connection that felt like coming home. That night, Naruto had a dream that was no dream. Acnologia, in a rare moment of introspection, showed him a true vision of the past. He found himself standing not in his soulscape, but on a vast, blood-soaked battlefield. The ground was littered with the bodies of men and dragons. A war of extinction. He saw a younger Acnologia, a human warrior with eyes alight with fury and grief, fighting alongside his comrades against the very dragons who had taught them their magic. The human was betrayed, his fellow dragon slayers turning on him. Corrupted by the thirst for power, he saw the human Acnologia survive, becoming a desperate, self-experimenting pariah, seeking only the strength to survive the betrayal and take vengeance on both humans and dragons alike. He saw the transformation, the slow, agonizing process of turning into the winged, destructive monster that was now the symbol of the end of all things. I was not born a monster. Boy, the dragon's voice was a mournful shadow in the vision. I was made one, by betrayal, by the weakness and the endless, self-serving violence of both your races. My hatred is not for destruction's sake, it is a final, all-consuming despair for a world that deserved to burn. Naruto woke up with a gasp, the taste of ash in his mouth. He didn't pity Acnologia. Pity was too simple. He understood him. He understood the pain of betrayal, the agony of being feared for something he never asked for. And that understanding gave him a new weapon, a key, not to kill the dragon, but to control him. He wouldn't fight the hatred. He would accept it, acknowledge its painful origin, and then choose a different path. The burgeoning peace was violently interrupted by a massive, continent-shaking tremor. It wasn't an earthquake. It was a roar, a sound so deep, so vast, it felt like the earth itself was screaming. It came from the distant, snow-capped mountain range to the west. The entire guild rushed outside, staring at the sight. Looming over the peaks was a massive, grotesque entity. It was a titanic figure with the head of a boar, the body of an immense, mutated bear, and legs like ancient, gnarled trees. Its form was constantly shifting, a monstrous fusion of various creatures, and its sheer size dwarfed the mountains. It was a beast of pure, concentrated magical power. What in the name of Mavis is that? Gray breathed, his voice laced with disbelief. It's magical power. It's massive, Urza whispered, her hand already reequipping a sword. It's unlike anything I've ever felt. It's an elder god-tier creature. Lyra's voice, a distant, triumphant chorus, echoed in the very air. This is a creature of the void, a fragment of raw chaos drawn into your realm. A gift from one of my more devoted disciples. Your little town is next, fairy tale. And not even your little monster can save you from a foe that consumes reality itself. The creature, a void beast, or chaos ogre, as the terrified crowd was calling it, let out another earth-shattering roar and began its slow, deliberate march towards Magnolia. With every step, it annihilated a piece of the landscape, leaving behind a barren, scorched earth. Makarov immediately began barking orders. Natsu, Gray, Urza, evacuate the town. Get every man, woman, and child out. This is not a creature we can fight in the city. He looked at Naruto, his gaze filled with the grim realization of what had to be done. Naruto, you and I will delay it. We need to buy them time. No, Naruto said, his eyes blazing with fierce resolve. He looked at the creature, a manifestation of pure, meaningless destruction. This was the final, inevitable confrontation with the kind of power he himself wielded. This was his burden. This is my fight. He looked at Wendy. She was terrified, but she was already running, helping to organize the town's evacuation, her small hands gently guiding people to safety. She looked back at him, her eyes shining with love and trust. It was all the strength he needed. Master, he said to Makarov, you help evacuate. I'll stop this thing before it reaches the plains. He turned and faced the colossal monster, a tiny speck against the immense bulk of the beast. He took a single, deep breath. Come, Acnologia, he thought, not as a desperate plea, but as an absolute command. I know your pain. I understand your hatred. But this world is worth saving. This guild is worth fighting for. And this girl, she is worth choosing over the end of everything. You will lend me your power. Now, the response was immediate and overwhelming. The black, jagged seal on his consciousness dissolved. The dam broke. Acnologia's power, a tidal wave of apocalyptic magic, surged through him. It was a power that felt like the crushing weight of 1,000 starless nights, but this time, Naruto didn't fight it. He embraced it, accepting the hatred, the coldness, the desire to unmake the world. And then, with an impossible effort of will, he forced his own purpose upon it. The transformation was absolute. Black, heavy scales of midnight armor covered his body. 2 obsidian horns jutted from his head. His eyes burned with twin cobalt flames, and a massive, leathery, black wing, crackling with dark energy, sprouted from his left shoulder. He was no longer just a human channeling a dragon's power. He was a maelstrom, a fusion of his human will and the black dragon's strength. He was a dragon king. He launched himself into the air, a black blur streaking across the sky towards the approaching giant. The Chaos Ogre saw the speck coming and let out a contemptuous roar, swinging a massive, tree-trunk arm at him. The mere wind pressure from the blow was enough to flatten an entire section of the forest below. Naruto didn't dodge. He met the blow head-on, his smaller, scaled fist slamming into the monster's immense arm. The impact was a cataclysm. A shockwave, visible as a concussive ripple, exploded outwards, shaking the earth for 100 miles. The Chaos Ogre, a creature that could shrug off mountain-leveling blows, stumbled back with a pained bellow, its arm momentarily paralyzed by the sheer condensed force of the maelstrom. Naruto hovered in the air, his wings beating slowly, the raw, terrifying power radiating from him in waves. He looked down at the retreating town, at the running, terrified faces, and finally, at the small, beautiful figure of Wendy, who had stopped her evacuation and was watching him, her hand pressed over her heart. He raised his voice, and the sound was a low, thundering roar that contained all the sorrow, the rage, and the desperate, defiant love of his journey. I am Naruto Uzumaki. I am the Jinchuriki of Acnologia. And you will not touch this place. This is my home, and I am its Dragon King. The final battle had begun, a solitary warrior against a primordial god of chaos, for the fate of his adopted home. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Hunter's Moon. The world had become a maelstrom of violence. From the ground, to the terrified citizens of Magnolia and the assembled mages of Fairy Tale, the battle was an incomprehensible display of divine power. Naruto, a black-winged comet of fury, was a blur against the colossal, ever-shifting form of the Chaos Ogre. His declaration, his claim as Dragon King, still echoed in the air. A challenge hurled at the heavens themselves. The creature swung its other arm, a limb the size of a guild hall, in a sweeping arc designed to obliterate the mountain range behind Naruto. Instead of retreating, Naruto met it, his single wing flaring to catch the wind. He didn't block, he flowed. He flew up the length of the arm, his scaled claws carving a deep, black trench in the monster's ethereal flesh. A spray of golden ichor raining down on the plains below. The beast roared in pain and frustration, its form shifting. Its boar-like head morphed, sprouting a dozen writhing tentacles, each one lashing out with impossible speed, aiming to crush the defiant gnat that was causing it so much pain. It has no core. Acnologia's voice was a sharp, analytical presence in his mind. stripped of its usual contempt and replaced with the cold focus of a predator. It is a being of pure chaos. Brute force will only make it regenerate. You must unmake it, erase it from this reality. And how do I do that? Naruto thought, weaving through the lashing tentacles, the wind from their passage tearing at him. You have my power, the dragon replied simply. The power of the end. Do not think of it as an attack. Think of it as a final judgment. The void does not destroy, it consumes. Naruto understood. He wasn't just a brawler with a dragon's strength anymore. He was wielding a fundamental force of the universe. He dodged a final tentacle and shot upwards, high above the creature's head. He brought his hands together, the familiar posture of his most trusted technique. But instead of a swirling ball of blue chakra, a vortex of pure, starless night began to form between his palms. It was a Rasengan, but it was a hole in the sky, a sphere of perfect, silent anti-existence. Dark lightning, the color of a deep bruise, crackled around it. The Chaos Ogre seemed to sense the threat. Its body pulsed, and a beam of raw, chaotic energy, a rainbow-colored torrent of unreality, shot upwards, aimed at annihilating him. Naruto descended, his single wing tucked in, a falling star of midnight. He met the beam head-on, his black Rasengan acting as a shield. The chaotic energy didn't explode against it, it was simply drawn in. Devoured by the silent hunger of the void in his hands, he broke through the beam, the monstrous face of the Chaos Ogre filling his vision. Its single, massive eye was wide with something that looked like terror. Dragon King's Maelstrom Rasengan. He roared, his voice merging with Acnologia's. He slammed the sphere of nothingness into the creature's forehead. For a heart-stopping moment, there was absolute silence. No explosion, no cataclysmic sound. The world held its breath. The Chaos Ogre froze, its form flickering. Then, starting from the point of impact, it began to unravel. Its color faded to gray. Its form dissolved, not into dust or light, but into a fine, black sand that was then drawn into the dissipating vortex of Naruto's attack. In a matter of seconds, the mountain-sized behemoth, the Elder God tier threat, was gone. Erased. All that remained was the silence, and a single, winged figure hanging in the sky. The strength left him all at once. The black scales receded, the wing dissolved into motes of shadow, and the horns crumbled away. Exhaustion, profound and bone-deep, slammed into him. He was falling, a limp doll dropping from the heavens. He closed his eyes, his consciousness fading, ready for the impact. It never came. A pair of small, gentle arms wrapped around him, and the scent of wind and fresh rain filled his senses. Wendy, propelled by her own sky dragon magic, had flown up and caught him, her strength belying her small size. "I've got you," she whispered, her voice thick with tears and relief. "I've always got you." They landed softly on the plains just outside the town, where the entire guild was gathered, their faces a mural of shock, awe, and utter disbelief. Natsu was the first to break the silence, letting out a wild whoop of victory and rushing forward. The rest of the guild followed, a wave of cheers and shouts that washed over Naruto as Wendy gently helped him to the ground. He was immediately swamped. Natsu was trying to lift him onto his shoulders, Gray was giving him a rare, respectful nod, and Urza had a small, proud smile on her face. He was a hero. He had saved them all. The feeling was intoxicating, and for the first time, he let himself bask in it, leaning on Wendy for support as his family celebrated around him. But as the sun began to set, casting long, orange shadows across the plains, the atmosphere shifted. The vibrant colors of the dusk bled from the sky, replaced by an unnerving, premature twilight. The temperature dropped, a sudden, unnatural chill that had nothing to do with the coming night. High above, the moon began to rise. It was too early, too large, and it wasn't the familiar, gentle gold of their world's moon. This one was a stark, predatory silver, a hunter's moon that seemed to suck the warmth from the air, casting the world in a cold, clinical light. A single, silver spear of light descended from the heavens, striking the earth 50 feet in front of the celebrating guild. It hit without a sound, but the ground around it frosted over instantly. The celebration died, replaced by a tense, wary silence. A figure slid down the beam of light, landing as silently as a snowflake. It was a man, or a being that wore the shape of one. He was clad in immaculate, form-fitting armor the color of moonlight, etched with glowing silver lines that resembled celestial constellations. His face was severe and beautiful, impassive as a marble statue, and his eyes, the color of a frozen lake, held no warmth, no anger, no emotion at all. They held only a terrifying, focused purpose. He was not a warrior, he was an executioner. The blight of Acnologia, the being said, his voice as cold and clear as a winter night. He wasn't shouting, but his voice carried to every one of them, a perfect, chilling whisper. His gaze was fixed solely on Naruto, dismissing everyone else as if they were scenery. The dimensional anomaly, the perversion of nature. He raised a hand, and a magnificent bow, crafted from solidified moonlight, materialized in his grip. "I am Orion, the celestial hunter," he announced. "By the supreme decree of the celestial arbiters, your existence is an unforgivable sin. You are marked for purification." He drew the bowstring, and an arrow of pure, silver light formed, humming with a power that made the very air vibrate. It was aimed not at the exhausted Naruto, but at Wendy, who was still helping to support him. It was a test, a judgment, to see if the monster would sacrifice the innocent to save itself. Naruto didn't even think. With a surge of adrenaline, he shoved Wendy behind him, planting himself between her and the celestial hunter. He had nothing left, no draconic power, no chakra, only his own battered body. But he made it a shield. Orion's lip curled in what might have been a sneer. "So, the beast has a pet. How sentimental." He fired. The arrow of light crossed the distance in a fraction of a second, silent and deadly. Naruto braced for the impact, for the searing, purifying pain. But just before the arrow could strike, a massive, red, warty shape slammed down from the sky, landing between Naruto and Orion with the force of a meteor. The ground cracked, and the celestial arrow shattered harmlessly against a wall of thick, tough-toed hide. The shape resolved itself. It was a colossal toad, bigger than any building in Magnolia. Wearing a blue happy coat and carrying a giant tonto on its back. And standing on its head, striking a ridiculous, dramatic kabuki pose, was a tall man with a mane of wild white hair, red lines painted down his face. And a mischievous, familiar grin. "Honestly, you kids and your flashy light shows." The man boomed, his voice a familiar, gravelly baritone that hit Naruto like a physical blow. "Have you no respect for your elders? Interrupting my vital research like this?" Naruto's legs gave out. He fell to his knees, his mind unable to process what he was seeing. The face, the voice, the giant toad. It was impossible. Utterly, completely impossible. Pervy sage, he whispered, the name a ghost from a world away. Jiraiya, the toad sage of Mount Myoboku, one of the 3 legendary Sannin. Grinned down at him. "Took you long enough to recognize me, ya knucklehead. You lead a guy on a merry chase, you know that. Hopping between dimensions is a real pain in the neck." Orion, the celestial hunter, looked from the boy to the old man to the giant toad, his impassive mask finally cracking with a flicker of confusion. "What is this farce? Another of this world's malformed beasts?" "Beast." The giant toad, Gamabunta, roared, his voice like an earthquake. "Listen here, you shiny little pipsqueak, I have more dignity in my left wart than you have in your whole body." Jiraiya ignored them both, his eyes fixed on Naruto, his grin fading into a more serious, concerned expression. He took in the strange clothes, the exhaustion, the way the girl was protectively hovering over him, and the faint, lingering scent of apocalyptic dragon magic. "Looks like you've been busy, Naruto," he said softly. Orion had recovered his composure. "It matters not. Reinforcements foe. Are the anomaly or just more stains to be cleansed?" He raised his bow again, this time forming 3 silver arrows at once. Before he could fire, Jiraiya made a single hand sign. Sage art. Massive Rasengan. He created a Rasengan in his palm, but it was enormous, bigger than his entire body, crackling with the raw, untamed power of natural energy. He held it with one hand, a feat of impossible strength and chakra control. Orion fired. Jiraiya threw. The 3 celestial arrows met the one massive ball of natural energy in the space between them. The resulting explosion was blinding. It wasn't an explosion of force, but of conflicting realities. The divine, sterile energy of the heavens clashed with the wild, chaotic, life-affirming energy of the natural world. For a moment, the world lost all color, becoming a landscape of pure white and black. When vision returned, both attacks had been neutralized. Jiraiya stood with his arms crossed, a grim look on his face. Orion's bow had vanished, his hand trembling slightly. His perfect, celestial magic had met its equal, or perhaps even its superior, in the strange, earthly power of this newcomer. You utilize the very energy of this planet, Orion stated. His voice now laced with a cold, analytical curiosity. A primitive but potent technique. You are no mere wizard. I'm a super pervert, thank you very much, Jiraiya said with a wink. He then turned his full attention to Orion. Now, I don't know who you are or what your beef is with my godson, but I suggest you take your shiny armor and go home before I get serious. The threat hung in the air, backed by the presence of a sage and a toad boss. Orion looked at the exhausted Naruto, who was now being shielded by Wendy and the rest of Fairy Tail. He looked at the powerful, unpredictable old man. He weighed his options with the cold logic of a hunter. The element of surprise was lost. The target was weak, but well defended. The new variable was unknown. He made his decision. The purification has been delayed, not averted, he declared, his body beginning to glow with silver light. The arbiters see all. The blight will be cleansed. The hunter's moon will rise again for you, anomaly. With that, he dissolved into a beam of light that shot back up to the cold, silver moon, which then began to fade, returning to its normal, gentler hue as the natural twilight of the world reasserted itself. The immediate threat was gone. Gamabunta vanished in a massive puff of smoke, leaving Jiraiya standing alone in the crater he'd made. The guild stared, mouths agape, at this strange, powerful, and utterly bizarre old man who had appeared from nowhere. Jiraiya ignored them, walking over to Naruto, who was still kneeling on the ground, staring up at him with wide, tear-filled eyes. The old Sanin's face softened, the goofy bravado melting away to reveal the deep affection of a godfather for his lost charge. He knelt, placing a heavy, calloused hand on Naruto's head, ruffling his blonde hair just like he used to. "It's good to see you, kid," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Then, his expression turned stern, the old teacher resurfacing. He poked Naruto hard in the forehead. "Now, you've got a lot of explaining to do. Starting with why you smell like a lizard and what in the name of the Sage of Six Paths happened to the Nine Tails." Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. Sins of the Past, Hope for the Future. The debriefing took place in Makarov's private office, a small, cluttered room atop the guild hall that smelled of old books and potent liquor. The atmosphere was ick with a tension that had nothing to do with the recent battle. It was the tension of two worlds colliding, of histories and realities clashing in the form of the two men sitting across from each other. Jiraiya, the Toad Sage, sat with a relaxed, almost insolent slouch, his presence filling the small room. Makarov, the guild master, sat ramrod straight, his expression grim and his ancient eyes filled with 1,000 questions. Naruto stood between them, leaning against the wall for support, Wendy at his side, her hand a small, warm pressure on his arm, a silent anchor. He had just spent the better part of an hour recounting the impossible, the end of the Fourth Great Ninja War, the battle with Kagaya, the dimensional tear, waking up in fury, and the violent, parasitic fusion with Acnologia. He left out no detail. From the dragon's whispers of annihilation to the strange, sad vision of his past. When he finished, the room was silent, the weight of his story settling like a shroud. Acnologia, Makarov murmured, the name a dark curse on his lips. The black dragon of the apocalypse. The harbinger of the end times. Our world knows him as a fairy tale to frighten children, a myth of a man who bathed in the blood of so many dragons he became one himself, losing his mind to pure, destructive rage. To think that his very soul, is inside you, child. Jiraiya's expression was unreadable, his usual goofy demeanor was gone, replaced by the sharp, analytical mind of a spymaster. So the Nine Tails is gone. Truly gone. And this dragon has taken his place. He looked at Naruto, his gaze piercing. This power you used against that giant puppet, the transformation, that was you accessing his full strength. I think so, Naruto said, his voice raspy with exhaustion. But it wasn't just me. It was like, we agreed. For a moment, The hatred was still there, but it was pointed in the right direction. An unstable alliance at best, Jiraiya grunted. You were lucky. Next time, he might decide your goals don't align and consume you from the inside out. He won't, Wendy said softly but with unshakable certainty. Everyone looked at her. Naruto's will is stronger. He proved it when he fought off Lyra's song. He proved it when he chose to save Oakhaven. And he proved it today. The dragon's hatred is a storm, but Naruto is the eye of the storm. He's the center that holds. Jiraiya looked at the small girl. A flicker of surprise and respect in his eyes. He then turned his attention to Makarov. These celestial arbiters. Orion the hunter. You know of them. Makarov's face darkened. He rose and walked to a heavy, locked bookshelf, retrieving a thick, leather-bound tome that looked ancient. He blew a layer of dust from its cover. They are another dark fairy tale, he said, his voice grave. A legend whispered among only the oldest of guilds. The story goes that in the dawn of time, when the gods first created the mortal realms, they assigned wardens to maintain the balance. These were the celestial arbiters. They were beings of pure order, tasked with preventing any one power from growing strong enough to challenge the divine. He opened the book to a page depicting celestial beings in silver armor, their faces beautiful and merciless, standing over the broken bodies of dragons. Their greatest fear was, and has always been, dragonkind, Makarov continued. Dragons are creatures of immense, primal power, tied not to the heavens, but to the very soul of the mortal world. They are an anomaly the arbiters cannot control. And so, an edict was passed. A great hunt. They descended from their celestial realm and began a war of extermination against all dragons. The Dragon King Festival, Wendy whispered in horror, the name taken from the history of her own kind. Worse, Jiraiya interjected, his eyes narrowed as he studied the ancient text. A genocide, a holy war. They failed, I take it. They were fought to a standstill, Makarov said. The dragons, led by their then king, Ignial, managed to seal the arbiters away in their own realm. But the cost was immense. The age of dragons came to an end on this world. The few that survived went into hiding, or like Grandini and Ignial, sealed their souls within human children to preserve their legacy for a future day when they might be needed again. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. They're back, Naruto said, his voice a low growl. And they're here to finish the job. Orion called me, the blight of Acnologia. They don't just see a dragon, they see the most powerful, destructive dragon in history fused with a human, an anomaly from another dimension. I'm everything they hate and fear, all rolled into one. They're not just after you, Naruto, Jiraiya said, his expression grim. They're after every dragon slayer. Natsu, Wendy, that Gajil fellow I saw downstairs. You are the legacy of the dragons. To them, you are a plague that must be eradicated before it can spread. He slammed a fist on the table. Damn it, we jumped from one war against a self-proclaimed goddess to another against a council of them. A heavy silence descended upon the room. The scale of the threat was suffocating. This wasn't a dark guild or a single crazed mage. This was a divine task force with the singular goal of committing genocide, and they were at the top of the list. It was Naruto who broke the silence. His voice surprisingly calm. So how do we fight them? Makarov and Jiraiya looked at him. The question wasn't one of despair, it was a strategist's inquiry. The KNU, Coalhead Ninja had been forged into a warrior king. Orion's power was celestial, Jiraiya mused, rubbing his chin. It's not magic as you know it, and it's not chakra. It's a purer, more refined energy. My sage jutsu was effective because it channels natural energy, which seems to be its direct opposite, chaos versus order. But I can't be everywhere at once. Their power comes from a divine source, Makarov added, tapping the book. A connection to their celestial realm. If that connection could be interfered with, or even severed, then we could fight them on our own terms, Naruto finished. The gears in his mind were turning. The strategic instincts honed by years of war taking over. We can't just wait for them to attack. We need to find a way to take the fight to them. To their realm. Or find a way to cut them off from it here. The idea was insane. It was a plan to wage war against a pantheon of gods. But in that room, with the combined experience of a wizard saint, a legendary Sannin, And a boy who housed a living apocalypse, it didn't feel impossible. It felt necessary. Downstairs, the guild was in a state of controlled chaos. Jiraiya's sudden appearance and the revelatio of the celestial threat had sent shockwaves through the members. But this was fairy tale. Fear quickly gave way to a stubborn, defiant resolve. They were being hunted. Fine. They would hunt the hunters. Natsu was, predictably, fired up. So these silver-plated jerks think they can hunt dragons. Let's see how they like it when a dragon hunts them back. He roared, slamming a flaming fist into his palm. The weight of the new reality settled on Naruto over the next few days. He and Jiraiya had a long, private conversation, catching up on the years they had lost. Naruto spoke of his triumphs and his failures, of the friends he had lost, of the peace he had fought for. Jiraiya, in turn, told him of his own desperate search, using his network of toad summons to track Naruto's spiritual signature across the dimensional chaos until he had finally found a way to follow. The conversation eventually turned to the one topic Naruto had been dreading and yearning for in equal measure. I have feelings for her, pervy sage, Naruto confessed one evening as they sat on the roof of the guild hall, watching the stars. For Wendy, it's different from how I felt about Sakura. It's not a crush. It's quieter, deeper. When I'm with her, the dragon is quiet. The world makes sense. Jiraiya was silent for a long moment, a rare, serious expression on his face. Love is a battlefield all its own, kid. And it's the only one worth fighting on. But you need to be careful. The path you're on is dangerous. Anyone close to you becomes a target. You know that better than anyone. I won't let them hurt her, Naruto said, his voice a low. Iron promise. I know you won't, Jiraiya said, clapping him on the shoulder. But you can't protect her from everything by being a shield. The best way to protect her is to make her strong enough to stand beside you. And from what I've seen, that little girl has more steel in her than most shinobi I've ever met. The decision was made. They couldn't wait. They needed a weapon, a plan, a way to fight back against the heavens themselves. And the first step, Jiraiya and Makarov agreed, was a desperate, terrifying gamble. They gathered Naruto and Wendy in the guild's underground training chamber. The plan was laid out. To sever the arbiter's connection to their power, they first needed to understand it. And the only way to understand it was to get close to its source. The only way to do that was through Naruto himself. We need you to enter your own soulscape, Jiraiya explained, his tone leaving no room for argument. Not to fight Acnologia, but to find the source of his power. The very thing that makes him a dragon. It's a nexus of primal energy. From there, we believe you might be able to sense the celestial realm, to find a weakness in its connection to this world. It's too dangerous, Wendy immediately protested. The last time he went deep into his own mind, he almost lost control completely. Which is why you will be going with him, Makarov said gently. Wendy and Naruto both stared at him in shock. Her magic is of the sky, Makarov explained. It is a supportive, life-giving energy. It is the perfect anchor. She will not physically enter your mind. But she will use her magic to create a spiritual tether, a lifeline to keep your human soul from being overwhelmed by the dragon's abyss. She will be your lighthouse in the storm. It was a risk of unimaginable proportions. If Naruto lost control, he could be consumed, his body becoming a true vessel for Acnologia's resurrection. If Wendy's concentration faltered for even a second, her own soul could be shredded by the raw, chaotic power of the dragon's inner world. They looked at each other. The fear was there, naked and honest in their eyes. But beneath it was a deep, unshakable trust. Naruto had faced down gods for her. She would now walk into the heart of his personal hell for him. I'll do it, Wendy said, her voice firm. We'll do it, Naruto corrected, taking her hand. They prepared the ritual in the center of the training chamber. Naruto sat cross-legged, his breathing slow and even as he entered a meditative state. Wendy knelt in front of him, placing her hands on his shoulders. Her body began to glow with her gentle, teal aura. Be careful, you too, Jiraiya said, his voice tight with a concern he rarely showed. Wendy closed her eyes, focusing her will. Her magic flowed from her hands, not into Naruto's body, but around his spirit, weaving a delicate, intricate web of light, a tether that connected her soul to his. Naruto took a final breath and plunged inward. His soulscape was not the familiar sewer of his Jinchuriki past. It was a storm, a perpetual, raging tempest of black clouds and violet lightning under a dead, starless sky. The ground was shattered, obsidian rock, and the air was thick with the taste of ozone and ancient sorrow. In the distance, a colossal, shadowy form was coiled around a shattered mountain peak, Acnologia in his true, draconic form, sleeping. But his presence was the storm itself. But he was not alone. Standing beside him, a translucent but solid figure of gentle, teal light, was Wendy. She was there. She had made it. It's so sad here, she whispered, her voice an echo in the mental world. Before they could get their bearings, the storm intensified. The ground began to shake, and a new presence made itself known. A manifestation of Acnologia's pure, primal rage rose from the shattered earth. It was not the dragon himself, but a golem of shadow and lightning, a mindless guardian formed from the dragon's nightmares. It roared, a sound that shook the very foundations of Naruto's soul, and charged at them. They were in the heart of the maelstrom, facing the undiluted fury of the apocalypse. And in the back of his mind, Naruto heard Acnologia's voice, a final, terrible ultimatum delivered not to him, but to the both of them. So, the little sky child has come to play in my heart. Very well. A final test, boy. You wish to wield my power. You wish to protect your precious whelp. Then prove your worth. Embrace the abyss and let it make you strong enough to save her, and lose your humanity in the process, or cling to your weakness. And die together. The shadow golem was upon them, its claws of lightning reaching, promising a swift, soul-shattering end. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. The dragon and the maelstrom united. The shadow golem of Acnologia's rage was a force of pure, psychic annihilation. It swung a clawed hand the size of a boulder, not at Naruto, but at the shimmering, teal form of Wendy. It was a calculated, cruel attack, aimed at the brightest light in this desolate, internal world. Naruto moved without thinking, a blur of instinct and desperation. He pushed Wendy's ethereal form behind him and met the attack with his own spiritual body. The impact was a silent explosion of pain that resonated in his very core, a feeling of being torn apart on a fundamental level. He was thrown back, his own soul form flickering like a guttering candle. Weak, Acnologia's voice boomed through the storm, a sound of profound, ancient disappointment. You fight my rage with your own. You cannot win. It is an ocean, and you are but a single, angry drop of rain. The golem advanced, its featureless face a mask of pure malevolence. Naruto struggled to his feet, his mind reeling. The dragon was right, he couldn't fight this thing. It was a manifestation of an endless, primal hatred born from 1,000 years of pain and betrayal. How could he possibly fight that? Don't fight it, Naruto. Wendy's voice cut through his panic, her spiritual form glowing brighter, a steadfast beacon in the swirling darkness. Don't you see? That's what it wants. It's not an enemy to be defeated. It's a wound that needs to be healed. He looked at her, then back at the raging golem. A wound. Her words echoed the sad vision Acnologia had shown him. The betrayal, the agony, the transformation. This mindless rage wasn't the dragon's true nature. It was a symptom of his pain. He wouldn't win by being a better monster. He would win by being human. As the golem raised its claws for a final, decisive strike, Naruto did not raise his fists. He did not summon a Rasengan of the soul or tap into the latent draconic power. He simply stood his ground, dropped his defensive stance, and opened his arms. He looked past the raging shadow, his gaze fixed on the colossal, sleeping dragon coiled around the distant mountain. I'm not you, Naruto said, his voice echoing with a quiet, unshakable conviction in the mental chaos. I understand your pain. I know what it feels like to be hated, to be betrayed by those you trusted. I know what it's like to have a monster sealed inside you that everyone fears. But I won't let it turn me into you. The golem's attack faltered, its claws of lightning just inches from Naruto's chest. Your hatred is a cage you built for yourself, and you've been trapped in it for centuries, Naruto continued, his voice resonating with an empathy that was a force all its own. But you don't have to be. You weren't born a monster. You were a man who was hurt. I see that. I see you. He took a step forward, his hand outstretched, not in attack, but in offering. He pushed his own memories into the raging storm. The loneliness of his childhood, the sting of betrayal from his own villagers, the pain of losing friends. But also the joy of being accepted by Iruka, the bond with Team 7, the unwavering belief of Jiraiya, the unconditional love of his parents. And now, the fierce, protective loyalty of Fairy Tail, and the gentle, healing warmth of Wendy's love. He showed the dragon not just his pain, but his hope. The shadow golem recoiled as if struck, a shudder running through its form. The raw, unfiltered empathy was a poison to its pure rage. It let out a final, agonized roar, and then dissolved, not into nothingness, but into a fine, dark mist that flowed back towards the true dragon on the mountain. The storm in Naruto's soul began to calm. The violent lightning ceased, and the black, roiling clouds began to part, revealing the gray, somber sky of his inner world for the first time. On the distant mountain, one of Acnologia's colossal eyes, a slit of molten gold, cracked open. It fixed on Naruto, and for the first time, the gaze was not one of contempt or amusement. It was one of ancient, weary surprise. "You do not fight." The dragon's voice was a low rumble, stripped of its arrogance. "There's been enough fighting," Naruto said simply. Acnologia was silent for a long, profound moment. The ground beneath them began to change. From the jagged obsidian rock, small, resilient white flowers began to bloom, their petals pushing through the cracks, a testament to a hope that refused to die. "The path you have chosen, it is a foolish one," Acnologia stated, but there was no malice in his tone. It was a simple statement of fact from a being who had seen the worst of all worlds. "But it is not a weak one. Your will is formidable." The dragon's great eye closed, and a new understanding settled between them. It was not a friendship. It was not an alliance. It was an accord, a mutual respect between two beings of immense power who had found a common ground in shared pain. Acnologia would not offer his aid freely, but he would no longer fight Naruto's control. The power was Naruto's to command, his to wield, his to fail with. A brilliant, white gold light began to emanate from the sleeping dragon's chest. It was the nexus, the very heart of the Dragon King's power. "That's it," Wendy whispered in awe. "The source." Naruto focused on it, reaching out not with his hands, but with his senses. He let the nexus guide him, and as he did, his perception expanded beyond his own soul. He could feel the threads of reality, the faint hum of the world's magical field, and beyond it, a discordant, sterile frequency. The celestial realm. It was like a satellite in high orbit, connected to the world by 1,000 invisible threads, feeding power to its agents. And he could feel the main conduit, the thickest thread, the one that led directly to the hunter who had marked him. "I have him," Naruto thought. He pulled his consciousness back, the world of his soul receding. He and Wendy opened their eyes in the stone training chamber of the guild hall, the teal glow of her magic fading. They were both physically and emotionally drained, but they were victorious. Their quiet moment of recovery was short-lived. A deafening explosion rocked the entire city of Magnolia, shaking the guild hall to its foundations. They raced upstairs to find the main hall in chaos. Guild members were pouring out into the streets. Through the shattered remnants of the main doors, they could see the cause. The sky was filled with them. Hundreds of celestial constructs, winged soldiers of silver light and animated armors wielding spears of judgment, descended upon the city like a plague of angels. And leading them, standing on the rooftop of the Cardia Cathedral, was Orion, his moon-silver bow drawn and aimed not at the guild, but at the civilian populace. "The Anoma, Lee of Fairy Tail has refused purification," Orion's voice boomed across the city, cold and merciless. "Therefore, this nest of corruption shall be cleansed in its entirety. Every soul in this city is forfeit." It was a monstrous act of collective punishment, a terrorist's tactic employed by a god. "He's trying to draw me out," Naruto growled, his fists clenching. "Not just you, kid," Jiraiya said, appearing beside him. His expression deadly serious. "He's declaring war on all of us." Makarov, standing on the railing of the second floor, had grown to his giant size, his face a mask of righteous fury. "Fairy Tail," he roared, his voice echoing over the screams of the city. "Protect the people. Drive these heavenly fools back to whatever hole they crawled from. Show them the wrath of our guild." The entire guild erupted in a unified war cry and charged into the streets. It was a chaotic, Desperate battle. Natsu's fireballs clashed with spears of light. Urza, in her Heaven's Wheel armor, sent a storm of swords into the ranks of the celestial soldiers. But for every one they struck down, 2 more would take its place. They were an endless, manufactured army. Naruto knew he had to face Orion. That was the head of the snake. He began to run, but a celestial knight, its face a blank, silver plate, dropped from the sky to block his path. Before he could act, a blur of motion intercepted it. Gajiel Red Fox, the Iron Dragon Slayer, turned his arm into a massive, jagged blade and sliced the construct in 2. Get going, Blondie, Gajiel grunted, a feral grin on his face. Salamander and I can handle the small fry. You go take out the big boss. He. Naruto nodded, a newfound respect for the ironclad mage blooming in his chest. He took to the rooftops, his movements a fluid, shinobi blur, racing towards the cathedral. He found Orion waiting, standing amidst the Gothic spires, his bow held loosely at his side. The hunter watched Naruto's approach, his expression one of cold, detached curiosity. You have grown stronger, Anomaly, Orion stated. I can feel the shift. The dragon's maelstrom has settled. You have achieved a harmony with the blight. It makes no difference. Untrolled plague is a plague nonetheless. I'm done talking to you, Naruto said, his voice dangerously low. He reached for his power, for the accord he had just forged with the dragon in his soul. This time, there was no resistance. No internal battle. The power answered his call willingly, eagerly. The transformation was instantaneous and complete. It wasn't the pained, partial form from his fight with Natsu, or the desperate, single-winged form he had taken against the Chaos Ogre. This was something new, a perfect fusion. His body was encased in a sleek, form-fitting armor of segmented black scales. More like a shinobi's Anbu gear than a dragon's hide. His hair remained blonde but was streaked with black, and his eyes burned with a steady, controlled cobalt fire. From his back sprouted not 1, but 2 magnificent wings of shadow and dark energy, and on his forehead, a single, sharp horn of obsidian curved upwards. He had achieved a new form, a perfect synthesis of his Sage Mode training and Acnologia's Dragon Force. This was his Dragon Sage Mode. Orion's eyes widened, the first flicker of genuine surprise he had shown. The power radiating from Naruto was immense, but it was also perfectly, terrifyingly stable. It was the power of a god, wielded with the precision of a master assassin. Impressive, Orion admitted, raising his bow. Let us see if it is enough. What followed was a battle of gods on the rooftops of Magnolia. Orion fired a volley of arrows, each one capable of leveling a city block. Naruto weaved between them, his new wings giving him impossible agility, the arrows streaking past him. He closed the distance, his hands forming a Rasengan. It was no longer black, but a swirling vortex of deep indigo, crackling with both natural energy and draconic power. He slammed it into Orion. But the hunter was impossibly fast, creating a shield of solidified light at the last second. The shield cracked, but held, the force of the blow sending Orion skidding back across the rooftop. Your power is chaotic, primitive, Orion said, firing another arrow. Order will always triumph. Let's test the theory, Naruto shot back. He made a hand sign. Shadow Clone Jutsu. 100 Dragon Sage Naruto clones erupted into existence, swarming Orion from every direction. The hunter was a whirlwind of silver light, his bow firing in a continuous stream, destroying clone after clone. But he was being overwhelmed. The real Naruto appeared above him, a massive Rasen Shuriken, darker and more violent than any he had ever created, spinning in his hand. Dragon Sage Art. Maelstrom Shuriken. He threw it. Orion, pinned down by the clones, had no choice but to take the attack head-on. He created a dome of celestial light around himself, a fortress of pure order. The Maelstrom Shuriken hit the dome, and the result was apocalyptic. A storm of wind and shadow erupted, the millions of microscopic blades of the jutsu grinding against the celestial shield. The sound was the shriek of a dying world. The roof of the cathedral was vaporized beneath them. When the storm subsided, Orion was still standing, his dome shattered, his silver armor cracked and smoking. A thin line of golden blood trickled from his lip. He was panting, his perfect composure finally broken. How? Orion breathed. Such power should not exist in a mortal vessel. Naruto landed softly in front of him, his own power humming. His body showing no signs of strain. I told you, I'm done talking. He raised a hand, a small, concentrated ball of dark energy forming in his palm, a miniature-tailed beast bomb. But forged from a dragon's apocalyptic might. This would be the final blow. He looked into Orion's eyes and saw not hatred, but a fanatic's unwavering belief. He saw a soldier who truly believed he was doing the right thing. And in that moment, Naruto made a choice. He dispersed the attack. Orion stared, confused. You show mercy to a being sworn to your destruction. Killing you won't solve anything, Naruto said, his dragon sage form receding, leaving him standing there in his tattered clothes. You're just a soldier. There will be another one, and another after that. This war, it's pointless. He met the hunter's gaze, his own eyes filled with a weary strength. Go back and tell your masters. We don't want a war. But if you bring one to our home again, I won't show mercy a second time. He turned and walked away, leaving the defeated, humiliated, and utterly bewildered celestial hunter standing in the ruins of the cathedral. His mercy was a more devastating blow than any attack he could have launched. It was an act of humanity, of moral superiority, that Orion's cold, ordered mind could not comprehend. Orion watched him go, then looked down at his own trembling hands. Doubt, a concept utterly alien to him, had begun to poison his divine certainty. He glanced up at the sky, his connection to the celestial realm feeling weaker, more distant than before. He didn't know that miles away, in the fairy tale guild hall, Jiraiya was holding a strange, glowing crystal, a device of toad sage origin that was currently disrupting a very specific celestial frequency that Naruto had pinpointed for him. The hunter vanished in a flash of fading silver light. The celestial army, their leader gone and their power source faltering, flickered and dissolved into nothing. The battle was over. The city was damaged, but the people were safe. Fairy Tail had won. But as Naruto looked out over the city from the ruined rooftop, he knew this was only a temporary victory. A humiliated Orion returned to his masters with news of his defeat. He revealed that their true leader, the Supreme Arbiter, was close to awakening. His goal wasn't just the purification of Earth-land, but the eradication of all magic. A reset of the mortal realms to a state of perfect, silent, powerless order. The stakes had been raised from a mere hunt to a war for the soul of the world. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. The God Star's Judgment. The victory was a fragile, fleeting thing. Magnolia celebrated, hailing the mages of Fairy Tail as their saviors once again. The guild hall was rebuilt with magic and stubborn grit in record time. The sounds of laughter and drunken brawling returning as a defiant roar against the silent heavens. But beneath the revelry, a cold dread lingered. Orion's final, chilling warning had spread through the guild's core members like a poison. They had repelled a hunter, but now the master of the hunt was stirring. Naruto felt the change most acutely. The perfect, stable harmony of his new dragon sage mode was a constant, humming presence within him. Acnologia was no longer a voice of nihilistic rage, but a silent, watchful partner, a shadow that mirrored his every move. This newfound power brought confidence, but also a crushing weight of responsibility. He was their strongest weapon, their dragon king, and the coming war would be decided on his shoulders. His relationship with Wendy deepened in the quiet moments between the looming storms. They were no longer just two lost children finding solace in each other, they were partners, equals. Her gentle strength was the bedrock upon which his own volatile power could rest. Her belief in him was the compass that kept him from losing his way in the dark abyss of the dragon's soul. They stole moments on the rooftops under the now peaceful moon, their conversations a mixture of strategic planning and the simple, whispered confessions of two people falling deeply in love, each word a precious stone lie. In the foundation of their shared future. Jiraiya and Makarov, meanwhile, were consumed by research. They delved into the guild's most ancient archives, combining the lore of Earth-land with the San Nin's knowledge of natural energy and sealing arts. The crystal Jiraiya had used to disrupt Orion's connection was a one-time trick. The true leader of the Arbiters would not be so easily thwarted. The awakening came a month later. It began not with a sound, but with a feeling. A slow, creeping wrongness that settled over the continent of Fury. The air grew thin, static and sharp with a strange, sterile energy. Mages across the land found their spells sputtering, their magical power harder to grasp, as if the very ethernano that fueled their world was being siphoned away. The vibrant, chaotic lifeblood of their world was being drained, replaced by a cold, oppressive silence. Then, the sky broke. Directly over Magnolia, a pinpoint of white light appeared. It grew, expanding with terrifying speed, not like an explosion, but like a tear in the fabric of reality. The sky cracked open like a sheet of glass, revealing a glimpse of the celestial realm beyond, a panorama of cold, distant stars and perfect, geometric nebulae. From this tear, a structure began to descend. It was a fortress, a celestial throne of impossible scale, crafted from white gold metal and solidified light, glowing with a power that bleached the color from the sky. It floated miles above the city, a new, malevolent sun that cast no warmth, only judgment. A presence, vast and unimaginably powerful, descended from the fortress, pressing down on the world. It was a psychic weight that brought mortals to their knees and sent animals fleeing in terror. It was the presence of a true god, and its consciousness was a single, unwavering thought: order, silence, end. A voice, neither male nor female, but a perfect, harmonic chord of absolute authority, echoed not in their ears, but in every mind on the planet. I am Saul. I am the prime arbiter. The judgment of this world has been rendered. The age of chaotic magic is over. The great purification begins now. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. Across Fury, magic began to fail. Dark guilds found their curses unraveling. Rune knights saw their enchanted armor crumble to dust. The Magic Council's great satellite weapon, Etherian, flickered and died. The very power that defined their world was being systematically erased. Panic erupted. The carefully constructed society of mages and non-mages collapsed into chaos. Alliances shattered. Old enemies, stripped of their power, were slaughtered by those they had once terrorized. The world was tearing itself apart. In the chaos, a strange, desperate pilgrimage began. Mages from every guild, light and dark, friend and foe, began to make their way towards Magnolia. They were drawn by a single, desperate hope. Fairy Tail, the guild that had stood against Acnologia, against Phantom Lord, against the Hunter Orion, seemed to be the only place where magic still held its full strength. Naruto's presence, the raw, primal power of the Dragon King, acted as a shield, a bubble of reality that held Soul's magic draining aura at bay. The Fairy Tail Guild Hall became a refugee camp, a war room, and the last bastion of hope for a dying world. The lawn was a tent city of bitter rivals and terrified families. Mages from Sabertooth, Lamia Scale, Blue Pegasus, and even remnants of Oracion Cease and Grimoire Heart gathered, their old hatreds dwarfed by the existential threat. Sting and Rogue, Leon Vastia, Ju, Ra Nikis, the strongest mages on the continent stood shoulder to shoulder with Natsu and Gray, their faces grim. A grand, desperate alliance was formed in the main hall of the guild, the air thick with the tension of 1,000 old grudges. Makarov, standing on the bar, addressed the assembly. We have been rivals. We have been enemies, he boomed, his voice cutting through the nervous chatter. But today, we are all just mages. We are all children of this world, and our world is under attack. That thing in the sky seeks to erase us, to silence the life and chaos and heart that makes us who we are. I say, we will not be silenced. I say, we will fight. We will fight for our magic, for our future, for Fairy Tail, for our world. A roar of unified defiance answered him. They had a plan, a suicidal, impossible, Fairy Tail-esque plan. With the combined magical power of every mage on the continent, they would create a pathway, a bridge of pure energy to assault Soul's celestial fortress directly. It was a one-way trip, an all-or-nothing charge into the heart of the enemy. Jiraiya stood with Naruto on a balcony overlooking the frenzied preparations. It's a bigger mess than the Shinobi Alliance, the Sannin noted grimly. A lot more egos, and a lot more colorful outfits. He looked at Naruto, his expression serious. This Saul, its power is on a whole different level. It's not a warrior like Orion. It's a concept, a fundamental force. Fighting it will be like trying to punch a hurricane. I've done that before, Naruto said, his gaze fixed on the celestial fortress that was a blight upon the sky. He felt Acnologia stir within him, not with rage, but with a deep, resonant hatred for the divine order that had sought to exterminate his kind. For the first time, their goals were perfectly, terrifyingly aligned. We can't beat it in a battle of attrition, Naruto continued, his strategic mind working. We need to cut off the head. I have to get to Sol itself. The rest of the alliance, they're a distraction. They're the charge that will break the gates down so I can get to the throne room. It was a cold, harsh calculation, but it was the truth. He was sending his friends, his family, into a meat grinder to buy him a single chance. The night before the assault, the guild was quiet. The nervous energy had given way to a somber, reflective calm. People were spending old be their last night with their loved ones, sharing stories, making promises. Naruto found Wendy on the roof of the guild, the same spot where he had confessed his feelings. She was looking up at the celestial fortress, its cold, white light reflecting in her wide, brown eyes. She wasn't afraid. She was resolute. He came to stand beside her, their shoulders touching. For a long time, they said nothing, simply sharing the silence. Drawing strength from each other's presence. I used to be so scared of heights, she said, her voice a soft whisper in the quiet night. When Grandini first left me, I was terrified of the sky. It felt so big, and empty. It felt like I could just fall up into it and disappear forever. She turned to him, a small, sad smile on her lips. But you're a maelstrom. A storm. But you're my storm. When I'm with you, the sky doesn't feel empty anymore. It feels like home. You're my anchor. Wendy, he said, his voice thick with an emotion he could no longer name. It was bigger than love. Deeper than loyalty. You're the one who taught me that home isn't a place you're from. It's a place you fight for. He reached out, his hand gently cupping her cheek. He saw his own reflection in her eyes. Not the monster, not the Jinchuriki, not the Dragon King, but just Naruto. A boy who had found his reason to fight. I love you, he whispered, the words feeling both monumental and utterly simple. I love you, too, she replied, her voice choked with tears she refused to let fall. He leaned in and kissed her, a kiss that was not one of passion or desperation, but of profound, unwavering certainty. It was a promise, a vow, that they would see the dawn, together. That they would build a future in the world they were about to save. The next morning, under the cold, judgmental light of the god star, the mages of the world gathered. Tens of thousands of them stood on the plains outside Acnologia, a sea of defiant, colorful magic. At the head of them all stood the core of fairy tale. Natsu, Gray, Urza, Lucy, Gajiel, and Wendy. Jiraiya stood beside them, a grim smile on his face. And at the very front, Naruto stood alone, his eyes fixed on the fortress in the sky. He closed his eyes, and when he opened them, they were burning with the cobalt fire of the dragon sage. The sleek, black armor of scales materialized over his body, and his two wings of shadow unfurled, casting a defiant darkness against the sterile celestial light. With a unified roar that shook the heavens, the mages unleashed their power. A colossal beam of multicolored energy, a rainbow bridge of pure magic and hope, shot into the sky, striking the base of Sol's fortress. The final battle had begun. The charge of the mortal world against the silent judgment of a god. Naruto shot into the sky, leading the way, a black comet of vengeance and hope, aimed at the heart of the divine. Chapter 9 End.